life. It's very exciting. Sorry,
Sorry.
we changed lives too, in a whole different.
Yeah.
This one was a
It's
drink
gonna
of
be
wine.
short-lived until Saturday morning. And then
Eight?
back.
One?
Yeah, they have practice next week.
By the bottle.
I feel like it's so tight.
Yeah, it's better than
But
nothing.
then you're so exhausted.
It was mostly, I think, she needs to get stuff out of the store.
So like, the sheriff's department doesn't have to follow the home anymore, so that's good. That's good. It was.
It's like no, he's
Yes.
in like basically just an hour over the state line
Yeah.
in Illinois, Wisconsin. No, so it's like 3.5 hours. Is there if there's no traffic, 3.5 hours? Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad.
Boy, they really had to raise these.
Yes, they did.
I was just noticing.
Their meeting, because I was like, row 105. Like, I'm at the big kids table. I'm always like,
Gotta be ADA compliant.
Is that what that is?
Yes, it is.
ADA.
So do you
They
park
were too low on the underside
better?
before we put those in, and now they are at just under the max for the top. Like, there's like, you have to be at least 27 inches high on the bottom, and you can't be more than 34 on the top.
Okay.
All right, it is 1:30, so we'll reconvene from our lunch recess and keep things moving with American Structure Point. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to interview with you today. I'm very excited to introduce our team and discuss our approach to comprehensive planning. American Structurepoint's an interdisciplinary firm. We have 11 different disciplines. Our planning team really is robust. We pride ourselves on, because we've all been in the public sector, is being able to create a very unified vision and give you a playbook for the future. So with that, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Iowa. I was driving up here and I got to stop at Casey's and I had a little twinge of homesickness. So I want to say that was great. It kind of was a memory of home. I've been a planner for 25 years. I was a county director for Boone County for 20 years. So I kind of know what it's like on your side of the table, know how the wizard does behind the curtain. And a lot of that has been very applicable and made me a very strong private sector planner because I'm able to really hit real world implementation strategies that will really be effective and understand how that government sector works. So with that, I'll let Phil tell a little bit about himself.
Sure, thanks, Rachel. My name is Philip Roth. I've been a planner for 35 years. Most of that has been in the public sector. And I started off in New Albany, Indiana, in the Louisville metropolitan area. Actually, most of my career has been working for urban areas. And it's only been since coming to Structurepoint in the past 7 years that I've worked with a lot of rural areas. It's been very fun and very engaging, exciting, and kind of a nice new addition to my career. And I really experience. So, Cindy?
So Cindy Sherezny, I am with Volt Strategies. I'm the president and owner. My firm specializes, and I have a history working in the legislative advocacy space. So I've spent about 10 years of my career down at the State House representing communities across the state. And part of the reason I started my own firm was because, when the gavel falls at the State House, all of this legislation that impacts communities trickles down, and interpreting that and implementing that can be overwhelming at times. And so I started Volt Strategies with the intention of narrowing my focus a little bit on the industries I represent and really helping communities from start to finish. And so, my business has kind of expanded. I still work on the legislative advocacy side pretty heavily. I'm a strategic advisor for the Indiana County Commissioners Association and represent communities across the state. And part of the reason I expanded into the comprehensive plan economic development space is because that legislation directly impacts how comprehensive plans can be applied and how they're applicable at the local level. And so you guys are the closest to the people. And so interpreting that language and figuring out how you can use it to your advantage to implement at the local level is something I'm personally really passionate about. So I am excited to present to you today with American Structurepoint.
Thank you, Cindy. I promise the marker means that we're going to have fun here. So we're going to switch into, we like to start with an exercise. And why it's important is you can see we're presenting on boards today. we like to have open dialogue, back and forth discussion, more of an intimate setting than like a PowerPoint presentation. So why we're doing this is we want to understand, what does a successful comprehensive plan look like when this is completed? What are some of the things, whether they're past, present, or future, that you guys see float to your mind that are going to be key initiatives of this plan? And so, like, Bob, I won't make Phil call on anyone specifically, but anyone can, go ahead. There's no right or wrong answer, whether it's housing, economic development. We just want to get your thoughts on what you feel would be a successful plan and key aspects.
Shared
If
vision.
you-
Okay.
When you start, maybe you could introduce yourselves as well. So,
I'm Abby Dickey, and I'm on the BZA and the planning.
unified vision
Okay.
for the county as a whole and all the sub-communities for different groups.
That was actually
That was
Leanne's
actually-
call out. You pointed to me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm good at
I'm sure
calling
Abby
out.
will agree with me.
I like
but-
that, though.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Leanne Wright. I serve as Executive Director of the Community Foundation of Pulaski County. And we are of, for, and by community. And so without having cross-sector partnerships that are collaborative and can get all of our tractors in a row and plow in the same direction, we, as a rural community, cannot leverage the resources that we have without being unified and moving in the same direction. So that is critical.
You're talking about crossing private, not-for-profit, public.
Everybody
sectors.
has to be all in.
Okay.
Balance, I would just say balance
Okay.
in quality of life.
Quality of life, growth, or you're talking more strategic growth versus?
And I'm talking community, balance within the community.
Okay.
Right.
County Commission.
Yes, I'm sorry, Jenny Kinneyville County.
Services.
Utilities, fiber.
Social services?
That's one, fiber.
Okay.
Across the board?
Yes, as you have pointed out in your proposal, rural, and we are a population of less than 12,500, and so access to resources that support that quality of life are pretty critical. So transportation, healthcare, social services, amenities, programming, childcare, yes, all of those things, and understanding that all of that is important to support that economic growth.
Housing, clean housing, safe, affordable housing, cleanup or removal of blighted properties. And I'm Carla Redwick, building inspector and plan administrator.
Piggybacking off of what Carla said about blighted, the two things that selfishly I hope to see most are A, really good mapping for our redevelopment commission. We've only had a redevelopment commission for a couple of years. We're just really now starting to find our sea legs. We have a lot of ideas we're talking about, but we need some help sort of like to make sure that what we are envisioning, it's not just based on our own perspectives with the conversations we've had, but that it aligns with the community's vision. And the other is that we have a strong framework for how we invest the revenue from the solar projects in the community to make sure that we are having a lasting positive impact on the community.
Now, why did you form the redevelopment commission?
So I don't want to take too much time, but it was a two-part thing. My office is the Office of Community Development, and we have my governing body is the Community Development Commission, which is not set up under state code. It's just a creature of local resolution. So we have never had access to any of the tools that an EDC or an RC has. We haven't necessarily needed them. There are times maybe we've benefited, but it's never been hypercritical, but it would be nice to have them. And on the other hand, post-pandemic, I was struggling to get 8 people out of 15 to show up to have a quorum for a board meeting. And so we overhauled our structure so that if the time comes, we could access tools like TIF, economic development bonds, and I could have some of the stuff handled by a 7-person board and some of it by a 3-person board. And I didn't have to hope I could get 8 people all to show up at one time that's been on the schedule for 6 months. And it doesn't just like, and the powers, so I mean, the TIF obviously, but also like,
Property acquisition.
probably, yes, nothing technically, I think, stops the county commissioners from purchasing property but it's a much clearer pathway when it's through the redevelopment commission than through the county executive. Yes. And there's a lot of potential in this county for county government partnering with property owners, nonprofits, to take some of those properties that are maybe vacant commercial spaces and breathe life into them that we couldn't have done before.
For that. Anyone else? I don't want to leave anybody else out. There's plenty of white space here.
I've heard from down here. Am I gonna have to call on people? Am I calling on people right now? It's fine.
Okay, no problem. And we've heard a lot of this from many other communities. We know how to navigate these waters. Looking at like housing, economic growth, renewable, restructuring because of the changes in local government funding, all of those things. We're going to go on later in our presentation and show you with these issues how we help those communities and be able to implement strategies within their plans. So we will make sure when we get to our plans and implementation that we show you how we've addressed these with other communities. Now I'm going to move on and show you our approach to comprehensive planning. It's a year process. American Structurepoint has a vision to action process. As you can see here, there's 3 E's. There's educate, explore, and empower. I like to add a 4th one, which is excitement, because I get really excited because being the project manager, being able to work with communities, being able to roll up our sleeves. And so looking at this over the course of the year, when we go through educate, we start to learn about you. We look at all your existing plans, any studies that have been done. We do a baseline analysis of your data. So we'll do a retail gap analysis. We'll also do a demographic analysis. And we'll take all that data to say, here's what we know about you versus concurrently what we've heard. So at the same time we're doing educate, we're going to be forming your steering committee. We're going to be holding stakeholder interviews, public surveys. So all that data is being collected not only from the public, but as well from just the data sources. And then we'll basically look at it and say, here's what we know and here's what we heard. Where do they align and where there's some differences? Once we've kind of gone through that baseline process, we move on to explore. And this is my favorite phase of the project. This is really where we work with the steering committee. We do a fun monopoly exercise. We do SWOT analysis. Phil kind of go over some of the exercises we do. But we really take all of the data and all of the ideas that were generated and we kind of break them down into land use strategy. So we'll work on saying, what's a future land use strategy for 5 years? What's your 10-year growth pattern? What's your 15-year growth pattern? Maybe it's preservation. Maybe it's ag conservation. So we'll take a look at the land use strategies there, as well as the goals and the recommendations in the explore phase. Once we get through explore, we go into empower. And this is really great because you can have a plan, it's got the greatest goals, it's got the greatest recommendations, but how do you achieve it? How do you really achieve it? And I think this is where our firm really separates ourselves from other firms, is we get into the implementation. We do something called critical path strategies, and this is an example. Since we are interdisciplinary firm, we have 11 different departments we can pull on to be able to give us resources. When I said we give you a playbook at the end of the plan, so it doesn't sit on the shelf, that you're ready to go, you understand, okay, this might be a year 1 initiative for economic development. This might be a 1 to 3 year initiative for housing. This might be a 5-year kind of long-term strategy. What we do is we'll take that strategy, we'll actually break it down into action steps of what it's necessary to achieve that strategy, how we've achieved it in other communities, how it will fit your community. And then this is my favorite part too. We try not to make people be voluntold, but we make sure that when we leave, that we have a community champion. And we're going to say, we're going to pass the baton to you, and this is where you're going to pick this up and carry it through. We'll actually put them down and say, you're going to be the lead agency, you're going to be the community champion, and we'll give you, basically a breakdown too of what the cost estimate is. What are some other communities done? How did they afford it? And so not only do you have kind of the implementation strategy of saying, I know exactly what I need to do, how to achieve it, what it's going to cost, but the enchilada question, how do you fund it? Where do you find the funding? Everything's great, but how are you going to pay for it? And that's where I'm going to lend to Sydney here. She's going to kind of give you some different strategies this way.
Yes. But, so put together that I am not an employee of Structurepoint. I am a partner with them. And with Volt Strategies, I have been on all sides of a comprehensive plan. I have led comprehensive plans. I am implementing a comprehensive plan that Structurepoint did in 2025. Actually, this is one of the county's critical path strategies that I'm currently working on in Posey County. I also have experience running a local economic development organization. So we talked about effective use of solar funds. So this county that I represent in Central East Indiana has a solar project where they get about $1.3 million per year minimum from their EDA agreement. And so why I partner with Structurepoint is because they differentiate themselves in a couple different ways, and one of them being the critical path strategy. And that is, you've heard Rachel say there's an idiom that does. This is quite literally a way to hit the ground running. Posey County, for example, started implementing their first critical path strategy, which was the UDO, before the comprehensive plan was even adopted. And so when I came in, it was a seamless transition to having it. Why it's important and beneficial to have someone like me on a team while you're doing a comprehensive plan is it just helps better inform the critical path strategies. So you talked about having social services. Well, at the state level, if you follow what the General Assembly does in the 2025 budget session, they cut HFI 60% across the state, which was a really significant hit, especially to rural counties as it relates to how you fund local health departments and some of their social services initiatives. I met with IDOH this week and they're asking for a full re-up of the program plus about $100 million in this next budget session in 2027. You also talked about whatever the revenue to solar. So, there's a lot that will come from these initiatives that go into your critical path strategies. Housing was a huge topic at the General Assembly this year. If you followed the news at all, in House Bill 1001, there was another bill, House Bill 1003, that passed that dealt with fire codes as it relates to who controls, the rule-making process of that. So if you have someone like me who's in touch with what's going on in the state, we can better inform the creation and implementation of your path strategy. Another thing that differentiates Structurepoint from other firms in the comprehensive plan process is their public engagement. Phil will talk about the monopoly game that I rave about across the state. But another theme that you unfortunately see with comprehensive plans in some firms is that it's a copy paste. And as someone who represents mostly rural counties on quite literally almost all four corners of the state, no two communities are the same. Even if they're all rural, they don't have the same needs, they don't have the same resources or opportunities. And so really engaging with the public in an effective way so that your comprehensive plan is representative of your community is catalyst for success. And with that, I'll let Phil take it from here.
I will add that the critical path strategy, that example that we're doing, isn't a land use strategy. It's developing a brand for the county. So the comprehensive plan does try to address and get everybody on the same page with regards to non-land use and development activities as well. So this is one. And regarding the generic part, you can see that the goals that are listed here, quality of life, agriculture, fairly high level, but when you start to get down into the details of implementation, that's where the differentiation starts to come in. You start to see some of the differences in how we apply things. Cindy mentioned public involvement. Rachel mentioned that there were 3 E's. She added her own 4th E. I'm going to add my own, which is engagement. We do like to get out and talk to people. Our preferred method is to actually have face-to-face interactions. That's limiting, but we like to go to events that are already taking place. We have Potato Fest coming up June. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, this is our fearless group leader dressed up in the strawberry suit. So he has volunteered to dress up in a potato outfit.
So is my daughter.
So, small stud.
We have a small
All right. But these pop-up events are really powerful in the sense that you can get conversations going with members of the community who wouldn't necessarily be aware of the process, but who are walking by because they're already in the vicinity and they see something going on and they talk with you. It's not the same old people that you normally get coming to public meetings. We do have public meetings, of course, and we like doing that as well. We have a virtual public meeting option. It's like a video game in your web browser that can be up for 24/7 for several weeks at a time. It has all of the same boards that you would have at a public shop. So it's just one more way for people who work third shift, who have childcare issues or transportation issues, to be able to get to be able to provide their input. We do surveys. These are usually electronic in format. Depending on the circumstances, we do print them out and with the help of our local contacts, distribute them in the community, collect them back, and include them in the survey results. We've also done this in alternate languages where necessary. We've been pretty creative with using social media to promote these events, using what's called a geofence, placing an advertisement and on Meta, where we denote the area of the county, and anybody who's traveling through the area can get an ad pop up on their phone, on their Facebook or Instagram account that would take them to website or a meeting announcement or a survey link. But Sydney mentioned and Rachel mentioned as well, we really do like to make things fun. So we have been using a variation of a Monopoly game to go through a land use planning exercise at appropriate points in the process. This is very educational for people because you're not sketching out on your own at one time, but you're reacting to what other people are doing, and you're seeing the costs of development and some of the ways that you're having to be strategic and think about what some of the circumstances are going to be in the future and anticipate that. So the example here is Cicerone, but we were thinking that we sure would love to be able to do a Velasquez. So, and that kind of brings us to what we like to achieve as outcomes for our comprehensive plans. Sydney mentioned that in Posey County, they started the Unified Development Ordinance before we were in. And this is one way that we keep plans from sitting on a shelf. We like to say that our plans don't even get to the shelf. They start being implemented in many cases before they're done. In fact, in White County, part of the plan is ordinance amendments started getting adopted, and actually focusing on that kind of held up getting the plan adopted. But we are working in White County right now, like you, as a county that has a lot of alternative energy issues, and both pro and con, and is struggling with that. So we have had a fairly extensive process there involving stakeholders, involving the public, trying to both be educated on and educate about alternative energy and come to some balance as to how to regulate alternative energy in a way that benefits everybody. I was also the project manager for the Posey County Comprehensive Plan that Sydney was using as an example. This was an interesting community that had kind of a divided identity. It's down in the southwest portion of the state. The part of the county along I-64 has a very different viewpoint of itself and where it orients itself to than the part of the county that's on the Ohio River. So in talking with them, we decided that we wanted to have something to be able to kind of unify the county and get everybody to see that they were all part of the same county. The other two examples are Rachel's.
Yeah, just going to go over, both of these projects were near and dear to my heart just because I really love helping farming communities. I understand growing up with being in a farm family, it just, you go to college, maybe there's second generation, maybe there's succession planning, maybe there's not, just ways to diversify your agricultural community and the businesses. So with Washington County and the economic development study, what they were struggling with was their little small downtowns where mom's going to retire, the kids are away, they don't want to sell the business, they want to retire. So we help them with strategies with downtown, with succession planning. We were able to help them diversify their downtown with co-sharing of properties. We also make our bot spaces. We were really able to give them an economic development strategy with their small towns, but also their rural area was declining. Their population had gone down, I believe, 15% since the last census. So we really worked with them. I learned a great deal about them. They have a great speedway. They grow maple syrup. No one knew that. I never knew that. So it was basically working with them to say, let's work on agritourism. Let's work on agribusinesses. Let's work on your strengths. And what strategies can we take to the public so they know how to get to the maple syrup? They know about your speedway. So we spent a great deal of time being able to help them preserve their agricultural heritage and their legacy, but still kind of modernize it to be able to have some sustainability. So I really love that project, and we spent a great deal of time. I'm just wrapping up Adams County Vision Plan. If you guys are familiar with where Decatur is, this was void of a land use plan. So this didn't have a land use element. So this was a little bit different than a traditional comprehensive plan. That being said, they're looking at the same thing in a different form. They are close to Fort Wayne. Their kids come home, they move to Fort Wayne. They do not come back to Adams County. They have a very interesting but very unique Amish dynamic there. And we were able to create a plan for them. We looked at things such as placemaking. We looked at parks, we looked at tourism, but we also looked at, promotion of the agricultural community and the heritage as well, and gave them strategies for the future to not only bring people home, but be able to say, how are we going to have an economic base once your kids graduate or your kids' kids graduate? Because it's starting to lend. They're saying, we're doing okay now. We're holding our own, but we're seeing people not return. Or if they do return, they're going to Fort Wayne. So this project, I'm interested, I can't wait to drive through it in 5 years and see kind of what comes to fruition, but we work very closely with the mayor of Decatur, trail system, parks, and working to help them to grow their population and sustain it as it changes. So with that. Well, I know I want to leave time for Q&A, but I want to say one more last time. Thank you for the opportunity to interview with you guys today, and we're here for any kind of questions.
I'm interested in the community engagement piece. How do you distinguish between input and influence?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Public input, we look at different forms from survey. We do an analysis with that. But we also have input that we hear at all of these different types of events. But we do on our steering committee, if there is someone that is very active or if there's a group here, I saw Protect Pulaski billboards, if there's something. Pulaski, sorry. If we do go forward and do like the steering committee, we put somebody on that board. We make sure that they feel included, even if, they don't feel like they have a voice. We're not scared, we have thick skin, so we tend to put them and let them out there say. A lot of influence, if you're talking about politically, we do stakeholder interviews, we do the steering committee, but we hear throughout. We like to make sure that the planning commission and the commissioners are very kept abreast of what's going on, kind of the waves of how it's going. And so we make sure that that influence is kind of kept. We have an advisory team, so there will be not only a steering committee, but there'll be an advisory internal team that's watching the entire process. So if you have, I don't know if you've got other thoughts on that.
I'll give a specific example. In White County with the alternative energy, we were having some of the stakeholder meetings that Rachel was describing. And we were setting up to meet with industry representatives, and we got pushback from some county officials saying, why are we talking to them? We don't want to talk to them anymore. So we still went out and talked to them, but we also cultivated some people who were concerned about alternative energy and have specific stakeholder meeting specifically with them to talk about their concerns and what they were bringing to the table as well. So we try to be very conscious about influence and try to make sure that multiple viewpoints are being addressed, brought into the planning process.
And so to piggyback on that, you know, going to the fairs and such is great, but how else do you engage people who are traditionally not at the table in this process? And we don't have really great broadband.
Okay. There's unique, Phil can speak to this too. We have sent out utility mailers. So if it's a very traditional, if you want a something that's not technology related approach, we can do utility mailers, we can do hard copies at the library. We can work with the schools to send it home. We can go to the schools. Sometimes we like to hear that younger voice. What do you want to see back here? So we'll get out, and we can even go to churches. We can go places. Like I said, we'll go to the people if you want something that's more of that approach. Kind of talking about, you know, working families and people that can't make a meeting. I'm one of them. I got 2 kids. I understand it. This is great because once you formalize the plan or some scenarios that you would like input for and not carry all that weight and say, are we making the right decision going forward with this map or that map? This is wonderful because you can put online the ability to kind of go through and get comments back from those that do utilize technology on it. But yeah.
We would also leverage whatever local resources you have. For example, in Richmond, Indiana, there is which is a little bit more of an urban community, but still, they had a Hispanic population that they were concerned about getting input for, but they have a Hispanic organization there that is able to provide outreach to them. So we provided them with a stack of paper surveys and translated into Spanish. They helped distribute and collect them and bring them back into our process as well.
Thank you.
So one of the things, you know, that came up, I brought up about, you know, making sure we take advantage of the revenue from solar projects to invest in our community wisely. And that was addressed in the RFP. What is sort of your approach to providing us with some kind of framework? You know, the county has recently brought on Baker Tilly to do a comprehensive financial plan for us. And so they're obviously going to be looking at more than just these solar revenues. They're going to be looking at our total financial picture, but that's going to be in play. But as far as what the final comprehensive plan looks like, how do you approach specifically making recommendations on how we invest those monies in projects, programs, whatever, to ensure the best long-term benefit for the community?
I think a starting point is to talk about, you know, in the Pulaski-Opoly exercise, the cards that we use, which are different land uses. And we tailor it to the context. We would have, like, what's the revenue coming from this particular type of land use that they're laying down on the map. We can tailor that to talk about not just property tax revenue, income tax revenue. It is possible to mix of revenues. We haven't done that today. It hasn't been requested of us, but certainly something that we tailor. As far as specific investment strategies, there are a number of tools that can be used. For example, capital improvement plans and programs that basically long-term, like 10 to 20 year, in them as capital budgets. And the intent there is to try to even out the expenditure that you're making, that the county is making on capital projects, so that instead of being very high in one year and very low the next, you're able to smooth out your expenditure stream to match the revenues that you've got. You're able to make rational choices on bonding. It sounds like Baker Tilly is going to be advising as well, but it would probably be the first to tell you that you want to have a smooth revenue stream, a smooth expenditure stream is preferable to something that's voluntary.
I can just add to Baker Tilly. Well, obviously, Baker Tilly was hired across the state a lot. I would say one passed, which still gives me today. So I think that working with the commissioners and the counselors too, and Baker Tilly running parallel, some of those discussions because when I looked at the fiscal impact statement for Classified County, it was, this year they pushed the date of all the effective impact. Different, but you had a loss for 2 years and a gain in 1 year. There's a lot of things that can change about that, especially something like regulatory. So working with commissioners and counselors, Baker Tilly, and seeing how that can be ran in parallel, depending on when that project is complete, will help inform how you might want to backfill those losses. Public safety, I imagine, is going to be across the state is the first thing.
And that's very much in the weeds with the tools that we can use to help you strategize with the revenue that you're going to be getting from the renewables. Other things that we can do, what's great here is I usually have a question called, if you had an invisible pot of money, how would you spend it? Where would you prioritize investment in your community? And I get that from the public. I do that from the steering committee members. So we're more than happy as part of this process and all of the input going through the survey. If you would like to see, to feel, not only the tools necessary of how to make your revenue work and sustain you for a long time, but where do you want that? Where does the public want that? If you want to hear that voice, we can funnel that through this process as well.
What is your level of engagement after comprehensive has been presented?
I just got a call today from Cicero, and they wanted to know how to implement one of the critical path strategies. They're working on some funding. So we like to have a very long tenured relationship. We have clients that I'm sure Phil does too that still call us because they're working on 2 or 3 year initiatives. And, not everyone has a grant administrator. Not everybody knows how things are changing. So they will call you and say, hey, this is great. Can you help? So we're starting on that now. I always recommend that after the comprehensive plan is completed, that you do a task force, that you meet quarterly or half a year to say, okay, all those community champions that got assigned here, we're going to meet and see where you are with that. And do you need help? And we're more than happy to come to those meetings or to help you afterwards to say, okay, we're really ready to kind of hit the ground running with this now. Can you come to our task force? Just kind of give us a refresher. So we don't leave you. We like to hear from you again. We want to drive through here and see it completed. So, yeah.
Recently, it runs the other way too. For example, our engineering staff does a lot of safety studies, traffic safety studies around the state. A separate pot of money that the USDOT has put out for those kind of things. But they also put out calls for projects for implementation money. So it's frequently the case that when those calls for projects come out, we will be a conduit of that information to the local, saying there's this opportunity available in case you wanted to move forward one of the projects that was in the study.
How to get a Parks and Rec plan, how to do some of those initiatives. We do Parks and Rec plans, so we can help you. Hey, here's how to get the ball rolling.
Kind of following up on your response to Jenny's question about implementation and the idea of this task force. In the RFP, we had mentioned that we hope that the plan will provide some guidance on how we ensure that we have the right staffing to implement this effectively, both quantity and like how many are in, say, my community development department versus Carla's planning department, and not just how many, but what they are, what their roles are. So we're not just creating positions to say we have them, but we're tailoring the job descriptions to find the right people to do the right things at the right time, budget permitting, of course. What is your strategy for developing and providing that guidance for us?
Sure. I mean, staffing is critical. I worked with the city of Elkhart, and they were at the threshold of like capital, non-capital services. If we annex, do we have to hire more police? If we annex, do we have to extend out utilities? We need a fire station. How's our coverage? So staffing's a critical issue as you kind of see and your community grows. The way that we've handled that through the comprehensive planning process is to be able to kind of look and do an audit of kind of what you have now and say, what are your staffing resources that you do have now? And then looking at if you're going to offer new services or if you're going to have, a long-range planner or a current planner. So we will audit your staffing resources, and then we'll work with you to give you suggestions, because this is your plan, and that we're going to turn this back over to you. So we want to make sure that it's something that, it's been vetted by your council and, is going to be conducive for you.
In my county, we are making a recommendation, it hasn't been adopted yet, but we're making a recommendation that they do resource share it. They hire staff that can be shared across the county and the different municipalities there. Brookston, Chalmers, Wolcott, just trying to get them to have, because they don't have a whole lot of professional staff in small towns, but they have enough needs to collectively justify something. So we're trying to be creative about that. I know, Cindy, you've been involved in Posey County with some kind of job description and some recommendations.
Yeah, this actually came out of this specific path strategy. They have a pretty big philosophical and literal disconnect in the county as it relates to their identity. And the way that their leader is set up, they actually do it with the region. And that just doesn't seem to be proving effective. And so what I do, and I'm kind of like Structurepoint, where my scope might be one thing, but my relationships are really long lasting and calling them whenever they need me or whatever they need. And so because of my contacts with the state and my work as a CEO of Alito, I put together a job description for them. They're in the process of approving that. I did a regional study for them, or a regional analysis of what comparable counties in the region and adjacent regions pay their, or in how they invest and what they invest in their local economic development organizations, whether it's a quasi-governmental unit or an in-house role, and what that looks like. And then I'm actually going to recruiting process.
I've helped communities too that were like Phil had mentioned too, is, they had a few communities you were talking about being siloed or trying to work together, that they didn't have the resources to be able to hire a planner for their team. It became an area plan or an advisory plan commission. So we can help if that would be something politically entertained, what those structures look like, what's required. We could always do that.
Why are you interested in Pulaski County? Why us?
Why not?
I can stats it a little bit in my introduction. I see at the state level, when I started off my career, I wanted to jump. And I started at state housing in my master's program. We did not learn about the state at all. So the state housing was a brand new element for me. And I represented counties both at my two firms prior. And again, for lobbying, but you see the direct impact. So tangible. It's July 1st or effective immediately, that some of these laws take into effect. And then going even further on the micro level is these comprehensive plans and how you implement them. And, I get on my soapbox sometimes because the state loves to wave the rural flag. We're a rural state, we're always remain rural, and I love that. But they don't always do the best in supporting the rural communities by the policies that they make. And so I like to be a part of that process on the most local level, because I can help thread the needle some of that and really help maybe bridge some gaps, because it's pretty daunting to track of the 150 hats all of you wear locally, and then you have your personal life with your children and everything else, and then for your businesses, because we're part-time, legislature and elected officials, and then trying to keep track of what's going on in your region, nonetheless at the state and even federally, is just overwhelming. And so I personally like the smaller communities because I get to bring that value, and they get to benefit from what more urban areas.
I also that I really, my experience with Boone County all those years, I watched that change and grow, and it's such an agricultural farm heritage, and it, was near and dear, but also too, helping communities be able to say, if farming is going to be, our future and our livelihood and our legacy, it's that generation, and working with that subdivision ordinance. You guys mentioned housing. How do you review that and say, okay, market has changed, land prices have changed. How do you look at that and, look at mixed density? I did so many farm plats in my career of looking at and saying, my son, my daughter, I want to leave each half and I want to do this. And being able to kind of have that legacy and that pass down, but also being able to say we need to look at sustainability and mixed density, and being able to look at our ordinance with kind of an open lens to say, what are we comfortable with? What's the right fit for our county? I really enjoy doing that just because I've seen so much how that changes if you don't have those core tools in place and how communities have to be more reactive and proactive. So I really enjoy working with communities kind of on the front end of that.
And similarly, I really enjoy and believe in what I do. I just finished term as president of the Indiana chapter of the American Planning Association.
That's why your name sounded
Emails from Bill.
Good or bad? So,
just familiar.
no comment. Okay. But at any rate, one thing that was really struck during my tenure there is how the chapter was very much engaged with small, medium, and large cities, but really was not known, didn't have a whole lot of presence in the rural areas of the state. And I kind of made it a part of my tenure to try to look for ways, particularly with extension service, for example, and trying to reach out to AIM, try to get more exposure for the chapter to rural members. So I feel that what I'm doing now is kind of consistent with what I've professionally observed in a larger sense, that there is a desire and a need on the part of counties to understand how development affects their fiscal future. I view comprehensive plans as a fiscal document, among other things. So I am very pleased to hear the perspective that there's some consistent viewpoint on as well. Your long-term natural future as a county is going to depend a great deal on practical elements and practical strategies coming out of this plan.
Sydney, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
I've heard this
I
before.
talked to my daughter about this, and I actually just talked to someone before.
Wait,
Teleporting.
That's good.
Teleporting. Yeah. So, my daughter's is invisibility.
you've actually had this conversation with your daughter.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I'd be scared of teleporting because you all your pieces coming back okay and just
Teleporting
I'm
other
not saying it's
people
out of
would be a
land.
superpower as well.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to
But
provide
the idea is if they're
transportation.
touching you, you can go with them. At least that's what the market says. So.
How do you incorporate the ordinance with the comprehensive plan?
That's a great question. When we take a look at different aspects of whether it's housing, land use, economic development, we'll look at your ordinance, because when I create the future land use districts, I take a deep dive and I look at parcel by parcel. So what I will do, we'll make a single family residential category. I'm not going to do that without looking at your ag district and saying, I don't know what your minimum is, if it's 2 acres or whatever it is. We will look at your ordinance, make sure we're aligning with the ordinance now, just to make sure that we want to make sure that this is going to guide your zoning. You want a zone. Mostly. If you're really looking to kind of modernize your ordinance, modernize the housing, looking at being able to have mixed density, various types of development, whether that's amenable or something that this community is open to, but we do a really good job of working with the steering committee to say, are you open to multi-family? Are you open to mixed use? Do you have planning unit developments? How did they go here? Did you like them? Are they still building out? So we do a very thorough analysis to say, what has already been approved that's maybe not completely built out? So what do you have that's kind of available for industrial, residential development? And what, areas strategically would you build out for? But we really look at the ordinance before we even put that back, because we're trying to drive our future land use map to modernize your ordinance. I don't, looking at unified development.
We say we have a pretty deep bench. And in the proposal, you'll note that one of the people listed is a lawyer who's on our staff. Ordinance, development ordinances, that's all he does. So to varying degrees, depending upon the need, he would do an audit to get to dig into some of the issues that he's talking about. He's the one who's working on the county. So we do have people, and we would have at the very start of the project a discussion kind of prioritize oversees the issue. So tailor the scope, be able to respond to concerns.
Okay.
Not only that, but it really helps your planning. You know, having a comprehensive plan that's very clear. We talk about uses a lot, whether they're antiquated or not. But if you've got a commercial district, what's your vision for that area? What's your vision for the type of commercial? You know, the BZ and the Plan Commissions, those are the guardians of that galaxy to me, because they keep the bench on looking at whether you grant a variance or not, or hold developers to a higher echelon of architectural standards. So I would say, you know, looking at all the land uses, we also, you know, this guide shows you what you do want, but it also helps your planning staff to say, we can help you exclude out what you don't. That guides into kind of where rubber meets the road with the ordinance and the law, but it's detailed within your comprehensive plan. So it's really easy. If a use that's something that's not preferred here comes in, you've called it out in your comprehensive. So it's a vision for what you want and also a way to entail what you don't.
Rachel, could you describe, so this is our plan. It's not going to be American Structurepoint's plan, but none of us are able to go without leaving some kind of mark on the work product we make, no matter how much it is. So like, what sort of, I don't know, perspective, worldview, philosophy do you bring to the planning process, whether it's like more like logistical, practical, or sort of like the school of planning that you align with and how it affects what insights you bring and how you emphasize things in the plan?
Yeah, if I give myself an overarching theme, I would say that I look out, I'm a futurist. I really, you know, being a planner, you're obviously always kind of looking at what's on the horizon, but I would say what applies in that, and out of my personality as well, is that a lot of comprehensive plans are told every 5 years, you've got to look at this, you've got to update. We're only looking at 5 years. I don't believe that. I think you have to, yes, you have to plan for 5 years, and you really have to have these implementation strategies ready to go that are going to be what you want to achieve in the next 5 years. But when you talk about growth strategy, I like to make a future land use compatibility consideration map where it says, here's your 10-year growth strategy, here's our 15-year. We're going to look at a preservation or production agriculture. We might look at this, and they're just considerations because we don't have that crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 or 15. But I would say that I really like to look out on the horizon 15 or 20 years. And I think that doesn't always blend with every firm. And they've gotten into the 5-year bubble. I kind of stayed a little bit. And the other philosophy of you really got to look at sustainability, not for, you know, some people won't be here in 5 years. And some people will have a new generation. So you really have to look at that far out.
There's a lot of quantitative analysis at the front end trying to assess where the county is going to be going. An example of this is in Shelby County. Their prior plan had a lot of industrial development plan, and it was creating some consternation on the part of local officials and local citizens. So we took a look at the employment projections, the investment projections, and did some calculations of how much land that was going to be taken. We determined that their prior plan had accounted for enough industrial land for the next 120 years. It was a huge over planning. We had a similar realization in White County, not to that extreme, but that their prior plan had overextended the industrial growth. And it helps to have that kind of quantitative information when you're going into discussions. If somebody said, well, this part is going to be taking off over here next to I-65, you could go and say, okay, we can increase the industrial area around I-65. What other area in the county would you like us to reduce to compensate? And that drives the point home that you're making tough choices about where the land uses are going to go, and they have to be data-driven choices. Wow.
I think a lot of times politically, you know, you see a map, it's very hard for people to dream outside or think that long, or they think there's a hidden plan. Like you've already got something big planned, and it's hard for the, you know, not generalized public, but just for people to see. So we're very careful in our deliberation of how we create these maps to say, here's 5 years. We're going to make this your future land use map, but behind it, we might have a 10-year growth strategy that's a consideration, have a living consideration, where you're just looking and say, what would be appropriate, maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, but it's not your genuine future land use. So I think it's a lot easier politically to kind of absorb that, to see that 5-year window and then have those future considerations behind it. So we make sure we kind of balance that.
You mentioned you have to take into consideration that some people won't be here in 5 years. Some people might not be here in 1 year. Next week, primary election, we have 1 Board of Commissioners seat, 4 county council seats. One of those is guaranteed to turn over because the incumbent is not running for re-election. We could end up with 5 out of 10 governing body seats changing. I know 2 are going to do because 1 council is also either way. So we're going to have at least 2, possibly 5 new elected officials between the Board of Commissioners and the council next year. How do you respond to address, work with a midstream change in leadership and the potential that could change priorities as you are, 3/4 of the way through helping us to figure out what our priorities are?
Yeah, so, until things I call feeling like you've studied the ground politically, this first process when I went through this takes about 3 or 4 months. Here, educate, where we're doing the data, we're collecting, we're going through the stakeholder and doing all that analysis. This is where we start month 4 or 5, we start getting into developing strategies, future land use maps, looking at implementation that would, could change or could evolve. Things that we've done in the past when we know there's going to be a change in the guard is that we always have an advisory group team that meets every bi-weekly. So they're kind of watching, they're chaperoning us through the process. They're helping us arrange meetings. They know you guys have your ear to the ground. We make sure that we have someone that's on the advisory team that's kind of watching the progress, kind of taking it from here. But we do the best we can to say, let's put this forward. Let's try to widen this out. We try to especially make the input and make the Plan Commission very much aware because they're going to make the recommendation to the commissioners. So, yeah.
I'd also say the defensibility of your public involvement is key. Being able to help weather some of the short-term. To be able to say, we went out, we talked to people from different groups. This is the synthesis, this is the compromise that we came up with. That gives the plan a defensibility that you can take to new officials and say, we appreciate your viewpoint. We incorporated that viewpoint as best we could in our process, and this is how it turned out.
What have communities told you that they appreciate most about working with you?
I think I can speak on
Okay.
yes. No, I work with 2 communities that have comprehensive plans. And I also work with and the difference I see is how they approach nuanced parts, the parts that are, like you heard me say that I see a lot of copy. I've seen other counties sit in before, not sure. So what I see and why I partner with them, because I will not partner with every engineer on these kinds of projects, is because the intentionality that has to go into this phase and this phase is different, and I think more to the individual. I can speak for myself, I guess. It's just a different viewpoint. This isn't. I think it's kind of new. Since I started, I don't see a lot of me, my skill sets in the economic development comprehensive planning side. It's either you're kind of at the state house or you're on the ground floor, and I've been able to do that with my firm. And it's just a fresh perspective, and I think makes everything work.
Go ahead.
I say that what we hear often is that they appreciate that we have a public sector background. That we do. I spent 2/3 of my career in the public sector. I think Rachel, that's a similar. My group leader is about 3/4 of his career in the public sector. So there's an appreciation on our part of when you have a plan, how do you use it? And our experience gives us the ability to make sure that what we're providing is realistic, but still has some type of visionary aspect to it that's inspirational, and that has a playbook involved as to what the steps are that you.
I think too, what I would say, boasting about ourselves here. We all have about gray hair. We've navigated solar farms, wind farms. We've navigated, very tough issues for communities. And sometimes I think the planning staff, I think the steering committee very much appreciates us being that diplomatic sense of strength to say, here's the pros of these type of, developments coming to me. Here's the cons of what's coming to your community. Here's the considerations. We're not necessarily making those decisions, but we've navigated it enough to know, hey, this is both sides of the fence on this. And I think a lot of times those communities are very much appreciative of our long tenured experience and ability to handle the tough stuff.
In Rensselaer, I was doing a public involvement event at the Jasper County Fair. And there was a gentleman who came up and he was, at the booth, he was very agitated and talking to me. And we got into a conversation, talked for about 10 or 15 minutes. And after he walked away, the representative of the city who had been sitting next to me said, I really appreciate the fact that you're talking to him, that you have such a professional yet open attitude about talking. And being able to engage people. So that was a testimonial, I guess.
We've sat through a couple interviews already today, and so your approach is a little bit different than what we've already seen because you partner together. So my question is are you engaged in this whole process? Is there certain parts you're engaged? I mean, I understand there's Structurepoint and your own. So where do you blend together? Where do you not blend together?
Sure.
What's the pros and cons of doing this?
Go for it. Yes. So this is the 12-month process, and so this data part, we make Sydney aware. She gets the existing issue report. She's going to be able to look at everything concurrently. We will be doing all the engagement and going through. She's really going to come in here and start talking about the strategies and the implementation and how to fund those. And then she will definitely be at the end of the adoption and being able to kind of pass this work to the vision task force, because she's going to have to work with people to say, okay, these are great initiatives. We want to hit the ground running tomorrow. We're
How do we do it?
How are we going to do it? You're going to need somebody like Sydney at the end to say, here's what I've seen across the board. Here's how they fund it. So she's here, lightly, heavy. So
I want to miss your potatoes. But yes, so like I said, I've led these before, so I'm very educated on the entire process. But yes, to Rachel's point, it'll be a little bit of the public engagement, but when you start to pare that scatter plot down into themes, really where I start
Driving.
Yes, to come in and kind of, yes, this is a great critical path strategy. Do you remember this happened? You have to say it, so you're going to have to pivot that a little bit, and maybe a domino needs to fall before they actually get here, so they'll just better inform.
For most of our plan processes, we have a small management team that meets on a bi-weekly basis, and it'll include a couple of client representatives, and include a couple of people from the project team, including Sydney. So there'll be a sharing of information. Usually these meetings aren't very long, 15 to 30 minutes. They're virtual, but they get a chance to share information, what's going on, and we could say, this is what's going on, and Sydney would be able to say, have you considered this, have you looked at this? So there's communication throughout the process as well, even if the level of effort may change across the process.
And it's the same for you guys too. I need to, if I didn't give you Mr. Hart, remind me how much you want. That's myself. That's myself. So I
We got about 5 minutes.
pride myself on being really accessible throughout the process. So if you're a part of the steering committee and you do something and, you briefly talked about the state level or something, fire building codes, and it doesn't have to do with it necessarily, but I'm accessible.
Yeah, 4 or 5 minutes till they need to tear down. Anyone else want to throw some questions at them?
What question were you expecting that we have not asked?
That's a good one.
Well, the supercar was first, but that one got
Think
knocked
I would
out.
have meant in mine, I would like my daughter to She's 8.
We said superpowers, not supernatural powers.
Right, that's fair, that's fair. Yeah, I thought you guys would.
I thought you were going to ask a lot more about alternative energy. That's an issue here. So, I mean, but
It's an issue.
an issue.
An issue.
But I feel like you addressed it well, just to give us a baseline of it.
Oh, good.
I think the comprehensive plan will come up with my visionary would be that, or my idea would be that we're going to hear alternative energy is a, big, loud voice, but I think there's going to be a lot of people come up with a lot of other things they want, need, and hope for in the county.
Yeah,
I think you're
one
gonna
voice among
yeah, you're going to get, a loud voice. You're going to get a lot of things they want. Well, we had one, they wanted broadband, we want schools, we want schools to prosper, we want, youth service, baseball field, arts, music, festivals. I don't know, I think people want to live in a community where they have stuff to do.
We do a lot of our engagement boards, and we put sticky notes to say, if you're prioritizing investment in your community, like you have the money to do it, where would you like to see the money spent first? Where would you like to see that in? With kind of prioritize where they want to see that, whether that's parks, schools, roads.
Internet.
Yeah.
We've had people moving up from Francisville. We've had people move to Francisville because they love the restaurant. They literally moved from Lafayette there. It's closed down now.
Oh, man.
It's closed down. They've also moved back to Lafayette in their older years. They're elderly and their kids went there, but they lived in Francisville for, I don't know, 5, 10 years, probably 10 years. They redid a house and it's all historical and stuff, and then they moved back. But yeah, it was a reason they moved there. They just love the small town charm.
Yeah. Getting away from.
They got 10 years of their life there.
Drive by and oh, not open. Yeah. Remember that meal?
Anyone want the last word? Don't say it, Sheila.
He said that last time. I said you usually have it.
Thank you so much. We're going to leave you some leave behinds today. We'll pass them out.
Completely.
Our heads are a little bit bigger on these, so just be careful.
It's all right, mine's always the biggest in the room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's nice to meet all.
Thank you.
Shuresny, yes.
I played in a band in college with a guy who was Hungarian. Only the second Hungarian American I think I've ever personally known.
I learned that Shuresny is the Smith of Hungary. I tried to LinkedIn my relatives and message the guy who names and get this I'm the only one in the US.
You a man who ran a circus.
No, Does anybody need a fresh bottle of water?
Thank you. Thanks for lunch too. I have a niece who is, she'll be 10. Good morning. And she like screams out. I'm not a morning person though, so it's like, looking right here.
I keep telling myself when she's 18, 28, she is going to be so strong.
Yeah.
And stand up for herself and all the good things. I have sympathy with.
Well, she gets it from my mom.
Yes, so my mom likes to tell me karma, for it, but.
Thankfully, I had boys.
Yeah, she's my little lady, she's my best friend. Yeah, she's a very strong little girl.
Did all those serve her well. Strong little girls make strong
Pretty
women.
much.
Yes, yes, we just need to get through,
I have a
Puberty.
secret.
First one.
Oh, yeah.
No, the second one.
What about them?
Oh, you know what, that was
Than how
a
they were
big
the
part
first.
of Max.
Like, interesting. That's why the score is interesting to me too, because you're adding into your score. But even reading them,
Hey.
hearing and listening, it's really different.
Yes.
Yeah, so you'll add this one in because it's a
Oops,
total
I didn't
of
do that.
15.
My bad.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's very nice to meet you. I'll
Thank
get
you
out of
very
here.
much.
I know you got
Yes,
two
nice
more.
to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
Very nice
Yeah.
to meet you.
Thank you.
But she's the only kid and we just started. It's been really.
Thank
good.
you. Safe travels.
Because she's not a team sport girl. But this has been very good for her discipline and she does try to wrestle me at home now.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.
Seafood Williams Design Group. You're scoring on the fly. You're not gonna fill out a single one of these score sheets until I'm done.
Oh, really? No,
I am very obsessive when it comes to scoring anything. Do you guys have anything to project? All right.
I'm gonna forget if they don't. Or me too, because I was even thinking.
I'm gonna ask that question.
Yeah. He's gonna hate these.
Hurry up, we're gonna be waiting for you.
Oh, I need to get you to sign that.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Before, I forgot about. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I checked my email real quick and I was like, oh,
I forgot
that one yesterday.
Already super worried about you trying to open it.
That's why I mean, I'll be practicing. I'll be practicing.
Yeah, he's gonna make me practice. Like, all I have to do is get it across the plate.
He's probably cracking up. That's hilarious. You know, that, you see that all the time. Sometimes the guy throws out the first pitch, but it's too tough. Misses the pitcher.
Well, you know, I am gonna put out there that I was on the softball team in high school.
Oh, okay, then, okay.
So I have a fighting chance of getting the ball over the
Okay,
plate.
you know what you're doing now. I just didn't want you to be like, you know, executive out here, like, throws it, gets the kid in the head or something.
No, and I'm not gonna throw it hard. It's literally, I'm lobbing it.
The kid will get, the kid actually gonna be getting out of yours.
No, it's just the ceremonial pitch.
Wow, good shot right
That knocks me
there.
flat.
This player out
Just what I need.
That'll be fun. That's awesome. Because it does a lot.
Well, it says Windows didn't load correctly, the whole screen doesn't look good to
3
me.
years, yep. 2 years that we had
You wanna, you got yours.
So I was looking at my numbers. I was looking at the numbers and it's about 615,000 total, 620,000 total since the foundation started and invested in the west side of the county. And more than half of that has occurred since my. Wow. Yes.
Yeah, I know, but it's still just.
Well, I go where the energy is.
This is what I put
Yeah,
in.
that's where you're seeing.
Our boys come out of my house all the time. So I get to talk to her a lot, because she sits out there. He's awesome. Like,
Oh, yay. Like,
So you just unhinge a little bit
like, oh, like,
and
transform.
sometimes you gotta hold it like I need a pop. Oh, you're good.
You're still young.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Where did that fish come from?
That's more
Where are you putting in the water?
maybe farm chemicals.
Okay, that explains the size of that fish. Actually, so we live on the river, and last summer we were fishing off the back, and kids interested in fishing. And my husband pulled in a fish like this. In my entire life, I have never seen a fish that big come out of that river. Most of them are like,
Yeah, teeny tiny.
yeah. And this guy, I mean,
Wow.
he was big. I couldn't believe
What
it.
is it? Oh, you have to join. It's like Pulaski River Rats, but it's like John Chapman and some of those fellows, but they show all their like fishing and escapades, but it is amazing what they pull out of that river.
I'm gonna look them up right now. Pulaski River Rats.
River rats, I think is what they call it.
Better than region rat.
Yeah.
I saw somebody pulled a shark out of there too.
What?
It was on the internet, so it has to be true.
I'm like, wait a minute. Aren't those saltwater?
Yeah, Tippecanoe River
That one's
rats.
set up to connect you to
There you
different
go.
number. That's not me.
Gotcha.
I can guarantee it was AI generated, just.
Yeah.
There we go.
Tippecanoe River Rats. Okay.
Oh, did I say Pulaski County?
Yeah.
Because that's all we've talked about today.
All right. Taylor Siefker Williams Design Group, welcome. I am Nathan Orger. I am the Director of Community Development for Pulaski County. I'm the one who, along with Carla, has been emailing you.
Abby Dickey, and I'm on the planning board and the zoning as well.
I'm Carla Redwick, and I think he's lying. He's probably been doing all the emailing on my behalf, but I'm the building
She's always
inspector
included.
and plan administrator.
I'm Leanne Wright. I serve as Executive Director of the Community Foundation of Pulaski County.
I'm Mike Dede, I'm on the Pulaski County Council.
I'm Sheila Hazimi. I sit on the Economic Development Board and on the County Council.
Very good. I want to know if you employ anyone that doesn't from Halsey. All of them are Halsey graduates, right? All of us.
Oh, yes, yes. In this room, yes, but in our other offices.
So I'm thinking through that.
Well, they're one of the only universities in the state with a planning program.
Accredited.
Accredited. Well,
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
All right, any other housekeeping items or, okay,
all yours.
well, very good. So I know in communication, they've asked for a brief presentation, so we brought out kind of a little overview to just do some highlights of our material that we previously forwarded to you, introduce ourselves a little bit better. to you all, give kind of some of the major milestones and kind of the outline of our process and the kind of fundamentals that go into how we approach comprehensive planning. And then certainly leave room for obviously the questions that you all may have brought for our group here today as well. So we'll go through and do all that introductions and kind of get to know us a little bit better here. But we do always want to start out. You all have been sitting talking about comp plan here now all day. And it means different things to different people, right? When you say a comprehensive plan, that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and how you approach something could be always different. And so we always like to start out with any community that we work in with kind of just a broad conversation regarding, as a setup, how we define comprehensive planning and what that really means from our perspective in collaboration with you all. So when we think about planning for Pulaski County specifically, really that big word, that comprehensive word, really speaks to talking about updating your local strategies, your local goals, your local objectives, and crafting that big idea. And so your comp plan is a time to sort of do that. It's one of the few times that you can kind of put everything on the table, kind of mess it around, and then put it into some logical silos with a clear blueprint for how you move forward with that. And those topics are varied, right? Like we know there are a series of items that the comp plan will want to address. And you've identified several planning elements as well that you'd like to address as part of some key elements within your community and your county here. So when you begin to look at all of those, that's things that we'll look at, those bricks and mortar projects, those softer side, the marketing, programming side, the capacity building, all of those things are part of your comprehensive plan. So you'll look at, from our approach, we'll help to facilitate, bring best practices, bring our kind of our background, but really listen to the community, because when you create a vision for your county, when you think about creating that vision for your county, it's really about elevating that sense of place. So all of those elements really go towards that. It's making a place that you're proud and you want to call home, you want to have your business here, you want to raise your family here, etc. It's all about creating and reinforcing that strong sense of place. And no matter what element it is that maybe you have a passion about, maybe economic development or community programming, tourism, or agriculture preservation, what have you, all of those elements are very important, but collectively, they really help to kind of elevate that sense of community and make that sense of community. And for our perspective, the most important element is the people. And so, as I mentioned, we really strive to be facilitators, collaborators, and listeners. At the end of the day, it's not what myself or others think in terms of this is what I think you should do. It's more about us kind of crafting that vision from the community as a whole. And we'll speak to that here later in our presentation regarding our approach to outreach and community conversations and the importance that builds for a strong foundation. At the end of the day, it's not our plan, it's your plan. We want the owners to be you all. And so that collectively is really important to us and reinforcing kind of the community voices within the county. So that's kind of our foundation and our philosophy whenever we approach any of these types of planning efforts or comp plan efforts. It's really building off of kind of those local voices and those local community members. A little bit of the Ball State grants here that you mentioned, kind of about us a little bit more. Again, my name is Scott Siefer with Taylor Siefer Williams Design Group, one of the principals at our firm and our practice. Been doing this kind of planning work now for almost 30 or so years in a variety of communities, ranging from community size of 50 people to we just finished up the Marion County Annapolis land use plan, so 1 million people, and everything in between. So we know that there's different kind of things regarding urban areas versus rural areas, and I'm sensitive to that. And I think that's something I have a passion about doing is kind of thinking about the long-term vision for a community, where that can kind of go and how we can help set the stage for that. And that's something that I feel really strongly about, and it's why I do what I do. Myself and others, I'll let both Sam and Deborah introduce themselves as well. But we are supported by others in our various practices that bring other expertise. But I will tell you that the three of us here are the people you'll see. And as an owner of the company, I do what I do, not because I want to do invoicing and administrative work. I do what I do because planning is like what I like to do. And I don't want to get removed from that. I still want to do that work. And so I think Deb and others feel the same way about that. And so it's something I feel very important about, passionate about, is that I'm sort of engaged as part of the process goes on, because I want that connection in terms of any assignment that I'm personally involved in as well. So, Sam, a little bit about you.
My name is Sam Weiser. I love playing the numbers game, and I only have 1 decade when it comes to the aviation process and community planning. So bringing, that multi-generational and the new age kind of lens to it. But at the end of the day, I am a community planner with the background in some of that more hands-on grassroots efforts of things. And as Scott mentioned, with some of those smaller communities, I've worked with populations of 58. So some of the things, I'm just sitting and I'm talking to the entire town versus the larger communities. So it's really getting into those nitty-gritty details is one of the things, as Scott said, that we love doing, and making honestly comprehensive kind of look at the county.
So, and I'm Deborah Luzier. I am the oldest of the Ball State grads up here today, chirp, chirp. I, too, like Scott, have been doing this for a little over 30 years now. I not only specialize in the comprehensive planning processes, but I've held about every seat on the planning side of things there is. I've been in Nathan's seat behind the desk in the planning office. I've been working for consultants. I've been like grant administrator, all different realms of things. And even in my current roles, I serve as planning director for smaller communities that maybe don't have a lot going on, but still need some type of professionalism to oversee permits and the development processes. So,
our practice is a community planning based practice. So we're located, we have an office in Indianapolis and Louisville. We're out of the Indianapolis location, and so it's right up here this morning. We are about 16 or so people, and that makes us a little different in that we call ourselves like a boutique shop, right? Because this is what we do. We're not a department in another kind of office or a larger type of firm structure. We're our practitioners, our planners, and this is our whole focus. And so in doing this type of comprehensive planning work is our core service. So we don't have other disciplines that we're feeding into. This is what we do day in and day out. And as Deb mentioned, our work varies from developing a comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance and policy development, to parks and recreation planning and design, community development, as well as she mentioned, our office also does some staffing for local municipalities or local. So we sit, again, on that side of the table, which helps us as we are developing some kind of implementation, particularly strategies at the end of a comprehensive plan process, because when we're sitting at the other side of the table, we bring that experience too, in terms of like, well, I know what it takes in terms of nuts and bolts to kind of maneuver and get that kind of policy through the goalpost or what have you. And so that's something that we bring in addition to that kind of that background in terms of community engagement and strong collaboration. So our practice often partners with Deb, and again, we've been kind of going back for years on different assignments. And it strengthens
17 years.
17 years
Yeah.
together back and forth on things. And again, our boutique firm and her boutique firm really work together in terms of kind of strengthening that code work and other kind of policy work that is something that Deb is very passionate about.
So yes, so my firm name is called Code Crafters. It's brand new, just started officially the 1st of January. So if you reach out to some of my friends in planning, they'll be like, oh, I know she's on her own, but I might not remember the name of the company, but have some long-term relationships with those folks. I started off on my own for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to focus more exclusively on ordinance development. And I also follow legislation for the American Planning Association, the Indiana chapter. So I'm involved at the State House, tracking all the new legislation. So my role in the group is to connect your comprehensive plan with your current ordinances and help figure out, what changes are going to need to be translated into your ordinance when the time comes. if we start talking renewable energy, data centers, all those new buzzwords that are coming out. I know what's happening at the state level and whether currently or what we expect to happen in the future and how we can not only discuss it in your comprehensive plan effectively, but then figure out what you need to do in your ordinances going forward. So right now, as I mentioned, I serve as planning director for about 7 different communities, including counties, cities, and towns. And so like Scott had mentioned, I sit on that other side of the desk and understand, hey, if you're a staff of 5, here's the standards and the goals and objectives of your comprehensive plan that you can do by yourself versus if you're just a staff of 1, what you're going to be facing. And we help to translate all of that for you.
Our work, as I said, again, because it's part, again, it's something that we do day in and day out. Some snapshots in the last 5 years, roughly 35 comprehensive plans, and again, a variety of community scale and sizes. And that, work again comes in the form of both locally funded, which you are now doing, as well as some Oprah funded. This is a reference, we're familiar obviously with that process as well, but I know you're all doing the local funded for this particular effort. But at the end of the day, these planning efforts kick off initiatives in communities and counties and towns that have resulted in millions of investment within their communities that they can point back to that was rooted in the conversations that came out of the comprehensive planning efforts and those community conversations that were held. And so that's something also that we're very proud of. From our perspective, between us and you in terms of the county, I think we bring a very personalized service. As I mentioned, we are the doers. So that's something that, again, we feel very important that we're engaged at that level. And our perspective is fresh. Like, right, we can look at things in a way there's no bias necessarily in terms of things. We can give you pros and cons about, if you choose A, if you choose B, there's maybe no right or wrong answer, but you can make educated decisions based on that fresh perspective. And so that's, I think, something else in terms of a role that we like to bring when we approach kind of the comprehensive planning process and the new client. With that, in terms of some of our background and kind of our nature of how we approach the work, I do want to pivot and go into a little bit of material that's in your booklets and our response to your RFP. Talking a bit about our approach, some highlights of that, and then our community engagement methodologies and techniques. So I will let Sam walk through a few of those items.
We kind of touched on it earlier. It is really looking at what's your needs of the community, because if you're just looking at a county level, every county in Indiana, they may have similar things, but they may be looking at it from a different lens based off of some of those constraints that they have. So really it's looking at, again, the approach that is best for your county and what your needs are and things that, maybe historically we're going this way, but now we pivot it this way because, say, a new law comes in. How can we really move forward with some of the things and not be reactionary, but have a plan and vision for it? So with that, Planning 101, you have your code requirements for it with your community facilities plan that you need to have, your transportation plan, as well as your future land use with that overcoming vision report. But with that, again, tailoring it to your county, what are the needs of your communities? What are the needs at the county level all the way down to the individual level and some of those community groups? And how can the county play a role in some of those elements, whether that be resources or facilitators with it, to then, some of the harder staffing, resources, physical kind of aspects, and how reorganizing those different topics and elements, which then equal your comprehensive plan and that vision and how we're moving forward, making sure everybody's got a seat at the table when it comes to that implementation aspect. Our overall process, we've broken it down into 3 different phases. My favorite phase, existing conditions phase, and that vision, again, as we say, everything on the table, nothing's been shoved to the side yet, and going into that strategic planning, okay, we have an idea of where we want to go, but it goes in about 6 different directions. Let's kind of narrow that down into one kind of forward momentum going into that implementation, okay. We have destinations. How long is it going to take me to get there? And what are kind of the people I need to bring along the way and some of those actions that I need to take to get to that overall vision? Some of the highlights of those phases, like I said, I'm a big people person, so when it comes to, figuring out what that vision is, going at the different levels of the communities, instead of just having, okay, this is your data, these are your stats, this is where the numbers say you're going. Okay, well, that may be different from where your people think that you should be going. So getting into those groups at the various local levels, doing your community conversations, going into the different communities, meeting with them. We've done those where I call them spinning signs, where I just have a couple questions on one side and I'm standing at a baseball diamond trying to get people, here's a coupon for an ice cream, and you answer these 6 questions and everything, and figuring out what works best for your community to make sure that we're getting all generations, all communities into that overall vision. Once we have that vision, how we're going, going back to those local needs, how are we organizing them? As with the Oprah, you had a bit more of that segment, here's your 13 elements, this is your locally funded, you can organize that into maybe some themes that you have going forward that can push that vision forward and be a little bit more flexible of making sure all of those needs are organized into their different topics that maybe play on each other. Then, like I said, how are we doing this? What are those partners? Who's bearing the flag when it comes to implementing these? Where's the buck stopping when, say, a problem happens? What are the resources that we can lean on? And again, going back to the community, like, hey, this is where we think we're going. This is where we're, bringing to the table, and this is how long those milestones may take. Some things may be, here's your 3 years. Some may be 10 years from now. The incremental steps to get that overall vision. With that, our process is very engagement heavy, and again, making sure all those voices are heard throughout the county itself. Because at the end of the day, as Scott said, we're the facilitators, we're the listeners, we're listening to the idea of a child versus a community member that was born and raised and have lived their entire lives in the county. And also looking at that collaborative process, the commissioners, different organizations, the different legislators, how they're working into this whole process, throughout the whole entire thing. Instead of, we're doing a plan, we're going to disappear for 8 months. Hey, look, here's your plan now. Having those different check-ins and those different collaborative efforts and that very hands-on approach to it. Then again, make those decisions based off the data, the people, and the overall movement. They can more attest to this, but when it comes to the public, instead of just having your open forum, I stand here with my fun presentation, and I'm more preaching to fire. Even though I have done that, I stood in front of a church and done pretty much a sermon for it. That was an interesting new one for me. But
with that big black thing in the back.
It's a chalkboard.
I just want to point out, make sure you guys are aware if we end up engaging you, that one of the challenges we face is that our fastest growing population sector is like 65 and up, and I'm just wondering if she can really interact with
Oh, we want to throw down some dominoes and play train and everything. That's really strategic.
If I'm Scott, I'm just wondering if I made a mistake here.
And that goes with it's having a one-size-fits-all plan for how you do engagement in the past. It used to just be those public forums. You had a public card that you had to have your pre-submitted question into it. There's no open forum. Instead, we really are, creating that broad approach for the engagement and making sure it's tailored to your community itself. Some things may work on a more digital aspect for one community, but then go to the town over, it's like, no, I need to go to the fish fry, I need to sit down, I need to have some paper flyers with some pens and papers, versus the next community over, they don't want to talk to me, give me an online survey, I will do it in my own personal time. Making sure we have those tools baked into it, so again, we're making sure we're a county-wide vision for it. We have a very kind of plethora of those engagement tools. We've baked in, your steering committees, your advisory committees, our community conversations, those touch points, again, along the whole entire process. But making sure that whatever our engagement approach is, it's the approach that works for your county. And it's not just, this is what we think you should do, having that conversation with you guys to make sure that it is the proper kind of course of action with it. Because again, that strategy for engagement, we're trying to engage and educate some people, haven't gone through this whole planning process in general, and making sure that it is interactive. Again, you're not engaging at the beginning and then here's your end product, making sure they're with us throughout the whole entire process and trying to broaden it. Maybe some people, haven't really interacted with some of the day-to-day activities, and maybe having that in person versus the virtual, and making sure that it's an elevated conversation. And small towns versus communities that are larger county initiatives, making sure that this really is a plan of the people, and it's not just a picture probably just disappear, go back to Minneapolis, but this is a plan that you guys are proud of and can stand behind. This is the vision for the county. So again, we'll have a whole entire strategy. When it comes to that, we'll have that kind of blocked out for all 3 of the phases, to have a comprehensive approach for it to make sure that it is metric-based, as well as, our key milestones as we process at those various touch points, to make sure, again, we're with that strategy and that timeline for all 3 phases.
Key to our process in that 3rd phase of work that she highlighted was the rubber meets the road, right? That plan and that implementation strategy. So certainly we want to give you, at the end of the day, a tool that is focused on implementation, that is very action forward and clear in terms of kind of roles, responsibilities, etc. When we think about it, kind of implementation and what comes out of the plan, no doubt there will be things that are, I call the bricks and mortar type project, right? Those physical initiatives, whether it's utilities or infrastructure or development, what have you. There are those kind of pieces that will be highlighted. There are pieces that are more on the softer side. As I mentioned, the idea of resource or capacity building, programming, marketing, cultural communication, etc. Those certainly are elements that would be identified and tools for that. And then certainly, as Deb mentioned, one of the key aspects is making sure all of your kind of arsenal of planning components, ordinances and policies work together. So if your comprehensive plan is identifying something that your ordinances or those kind of things are maybe not fully aligned with, you want to make sure you highlight what is that deficiency, because as a step of implementation, refreshing or revising or updating that eliminates a barrier of moving something forward that you spend a year talking about, identifying and wanting to accomplish. So looking at kind of those development or policy tools or ordinances is obviously also critical. At the end of the day, that really, again, provides our implementation ideas, something that's very actionable. So that blueprint is something that's very clear in terms of objectives and what you're trying to achieve. And it's measurable. So it's something that we outline with whatever the recommendations are, typically identify who's responsible, what organizations would participate, what agencies or resources could be utilized to help move said idea or concept or recommendation forward. Because at the end of the day, again, it's always about collaboration. It's never just the county commissioners or the county council or the staff, but it's partners to move those things forward. And so as part of our implementation plan, we identify kind of what those responsible parties, what their roles are, what a timeline might be for said project. And so you're set up then to kind of move some of those initiatives and recommendations forward. We typically recommend that you annually do what we call a report card check-in, that you review at a kind of a high level of where you're at with your kind of your comprehensive plan elements. And so, if there's some things that move forward, you note that. If there are things that haven't moved forward, there's probably good explanations for why that is. But at least it keeps things kind of fresh and in the minds of everyone that's kind of helping to kind of, again, move the initiative and the comprehensive plan elements along in a positive and meaningful direction. And then typically, we usually suggest every 5 years to kind of do just a light touch or a light refresh, because you may have completed some things that now are something you've moved on to, or there may be a new program at the state level, as an example, that was not, in 2026, 27, when we're working on this, didn't exist. Something else happened, you were able to move forward with an initiative that was in your comp plan because you were able to hold that up, right? And say, we've talked about this and it fits to this program that's now been, created or identified. So again, when you kind of do that, those touch points, report card or light reviews, that keeps the comp plan as a very usable document, not something that's just buried in the office somewhere and then in 10 years you should update it. So we want it to be something that you do utilize, and the implementation section is key to that. At the end of the day, what we're really proud of in the communities that we've worked in, that very early slide talked about the millions of dollars of investments that communities have leveraged as a result of having their comprehensive plan and elements in their comprehensive plan identified, talked about, endorsed, and moved forward, is that it doesn't matter if it's projects that come out of say policy or ordinance rewrite or update, or infrastructure projects that were identified as critical needs or long-term goals. Community placemaking or cultural initiatives.
I don't know, sorry, did you work on Jasper's River Center?
We did.
Worked with Ed Curtin on that
Ed
project.
Curtin.
Ed was just here Tuesday night as our guest speaker
Oh, yes.
and
Yep.
mentioned that project.
Yep, so we were with that on that. Yes, that's correct. Now I don't know what I train of thought.
Sorry, I saw a shiny thing.
A good example of, so we did Jasper's, now I'm totally going off on that, I got squirreled, right? So we did the Jasper comp plan, and one of the things in the Jasper comp plan, of course, was a reconnection to the river as one of their main, driving things. In the River Center was a development that came out, obviously, with the city that started working with the local developer, Jane Hendrickson and Ed Curtin. They were partnered in terms of helping that, and we helped on the sort of the physical planning side of that. But that's an example right there of something, of something that kind of came out of, snowballed out of their very particular kind of their comprehensive plan and their strategic downtown sort of direction that was a result of those conversations. And so, a very good example in terms of the ideas of moving those things forward and not letting some of the ideas that are generated inside the community during the comp plan process just, go to the wayside. So I think we do see the comp plan, and hopefully you all do too, or you wouldn't maybe be doing this. Your comprehensive plan is really your opportunity to have that conversations about dreaming big, thinking about the big ideas, what those may be, thinking about what could be on the table. That opportunity to kind of do that is a lot of times something that the comp plan gives you a chance to have that conversation that you don't necessarily have. As Sam mentioned, we do root it in data-driven, realistic metrics. So we don't want to, at the end of the day, kind of skew things off in terms of something that's unrealistic. But it's important to bring those big ideas to the table. It's important, there's an opportunity here to engage your community, right? So the towns within the county, the rural areas, et cetera, broadening the reach. So if those that like the first picture she showed and want to come to the meetings, we'll offer that. We'll also offer, if you want to, the county fair, have a little booth, we'll offer that if you want to do it online. The point is engaging and touching as many people within the county as possible, or at least given an opportunity is important. And then finally, act. So again, going back to the implementation, right? Creating something that's very results-oriented, so it's usable for you all in the years following the completion of the effort. It's something that we feel very passionate about as well. So with that, I'm going to pause, but before I do, Sam, we did bring some samples, and Sam and Deb can maybe share those. There are a variety. We tried to select a few county projects. I think today, Grant County, Blackburn County, Kosciuszko County. Those were a combination. A couple of them were Oprah, a couple of them are locally funded. And then Harrison County and Clark County is there. And we threw in Otter Bend. Obviously, it's not county scale, but it's a small rural community. And so it's an example of a small rural community and kind of their efforts. All the examples vary. Some are more day-to-day policy-based, some are more physical-based. And so there's a difference in terms of how they're structured, and clearly a couple of them that are Oprah, the format is the Oprah format, so it's very structured versus the ones that we could have a little bit more flexibility locally to sort of organize and, you know, and craft based on kind of what came out of the conversations and the direction that those planning efforts took. So we invite you to kind of pass those and share those as we have kind of our Q&A time here. And we certainly open any questions and conversations you may bring to the table for us.
And just to highlight again, just some of these, some of the counties, they focus on more, we are the county, and then it kind of trickles down to the communities. Whereas some of the others, it's like, okay, no, we want kind of our county vision stuff and, you know, some of the elements, but then we want you guys to go into the individual communities, and they also have their more community focused initiatives with it. So that's, again, something, you know, depending on what direction you guys would like to go with the conference, and you have that flexibility that we can work with you to make sure that the product that you get, you know, encompasses that direction that you'd like to go.
Scott, if you could have any one superpower, what would it be and why?
Well, my vision sometimes isn't that great, so.
How are you a planner with bad vision?
This kind of vision.
That's right. Like my glasses are very thick lenses, so I think the superpower is like Superman, right? It has like a little extra vision and really, he can see all sorts of things and do things and anticipate things. So I would do something with related there to vision, because again, I am a very visual person, so any aid that I can have that helps that is what I would think.
To be fair though, even though Superman has X-ray vision, he also wears glasses when he's Clark Kent.
That is true. That is true.
That's a disguise.
Okay, I guess, are the glasses part of the disguise?
So you had me at ice cream. You had mentioned some of the more non-traditional methods of community engagement. What are some other ways that you bring people to the table who are traditionally not represented in community engagement?
Mm-hmm. So we liked then, if that's the case, we kind of have two different ways that we do engagement when it comes to, are we a freestanding event or are we attached to an event? Like, so if there's something that, you know, think of it more as like, they're a captive audience. One of my favorite ones that I ever did is I went to bingo night, and I think that was the most engagement I ever had, because we had that in-between time. I was able to hop, you know, table to table and just talk about, you know, hi, well, like, what'd you do this week and everything, or what's something that, you know, has been bugging you recently, and being able to more have that personal conversation. But again, you know, identifying if there are groups that, you know, a demographic or even just location in the county that hasn't had that really key touch point. Mm-hmm. What do they do, and how can we get that invitation into that space to be able to have that more candid conversation instead of, you know, forcing them to come out of their more bubble, you know, kind of comfort area, because maybe we can go to them and have that kind of conversation. Okay.
We've done physical things like creation of a mobile display where it can go and we're not there, right? If you're not there, but it's sort of, whether it's in the local library or in a local business or a church for a Sunday, that kind of idea. She mentioned, like, if we attach ourselves to an event, we've attached ourselves to a basketball game or a farmer's market, all those kind of things. And this is obviously all of those kind of ideas are in addition to the sort of digital platform. We try to echo whatever we're doing in person. We also try to have, whether it's mapping or preference vote, whatever it is, we also try to match that digitally, so we're able to kind of look at sort of the same kind of responses to the similar questions, even though the formats are completely different.
Mm-hmm. To follow up on that, how do you distinguish between input and influence?
So
I would say I have an answer for this.
Yeah, we might all have an answer for that. So, you know, to me, I think that some input, how I would approach input is that making sure that you're capturing information, feedback from a wide cross-section of folks. Because I think if you see trends from a wide cross-section, then that is what it is. It's a trend, right? I can see it in multiple different voices. Influence obviously is, someone's wanting to kind of have their finger on the scale and they're the loudest talker in the room. Your comment is noted, but that's one comment of 600 that we got. So that's how I start to sort of try to balance the influence versus the.
And I would kind of go into how we, set the pace for that. With some of our like open house engagement opportunities, there's a lot of time, even though we don't know every individual person. Sometimes people feel that they're being watched as I put my single red dot next to the 10 green dots and everything. So we have our own kind of internal exercises to increase that kind of anonymity and everything for us, to be able to put your token behind a screen so you can't even see what other people are voting for, but that's still that in-person thing to correlate with that online stuff, or even just instead of having something you physically do, it's you're telling me and I'm the one putting the sticky note down, and I'm putting the sticker, or I'm pasting the token. So it takes that pressure off of maybe a voice that is one versus the loud 10 and everything, but making sure we're still getting that one. Good, thank you.
So one of the things that we had mentioned in the RFP that we want to get out of this is a framework that will allow us to make the best decisions possible, investing the revenues from the solar projects built in the county for the most sustainable and widespread and substantial community impact. So Baker Tilly has just come on to do a bigger financial plan for us, obviously, and there will be some overlap, but obviously the perspective you bring is going to be rooted in the comprehensive plan, the public engagement. But what I guess is your approach to or strategy for turning the raw information, what you get from the public engagement, what our financial picture looks like and what those revenues are going to look like, into usable guidelines for us to make sure that we are making the wisest decisions with those funds?
I think that goes back to what your goals are and what you want those milestones to be. So, for example, if a goal is to increase your population and everything, there's certain avenues that you can increase population, whether it be employment or housing or things like that. So it's what that goal is. If we're wanting to increase strictly just the revenue, or if we're using that revenue because our goal is to expand some of our facilities improvements and everything, and figuring out what that targeted, again, what that vision is, and what that kind of milestone for that, because that kind of directs what your initiatives are and how we're implementing those and phasing those out, because you can't just do everything all at once, getting into that phasing where you have an initial focus here for some of those short-term things, because those are going to take a bit more to mature as you move along with it and compound that. Whereas some of the other ones, like once we get these priority done, then we can go to some of the wants instead of focusing on just the need itself.
And one of the objectives that could come out of the plan is, hey, we need to do an in-depth capital improvements program, or perhaps we need an economic development plan in addition to what we identified in the comprehensive plan. So our objectives, well, in that implementation table would say, here's the entities we want involved in that, here's the source of our funds, here's the checklist or grocery list of things we want to spend those funds on, and let's do a deep dive into that.
What is your level of involvement after you present?
Our individual or?
From a team perspective, once the adoption, is that what you're asking? Yeah. So again, we've worked in many communities where I use the phrase a trusted advisor, you kind of become back to them. I think that's, again, very positive for us. And we like for that to be the occurrence. And by that, I mean, I go back and reference, for instance, like the annual report card as an example. Like in a lot of communities, we're invited back to facilitate that, right? Because then it actually happens. Like it actually occurs. So then we come back and we become the facilitators and just sort of do a little sort of work session, right? In terms of where things are at, what are kind of some things that have been moved forward or not, and have those kind of conversations. So we often are invited to do that, and we're happy to certainly do that. And then again, like if some projects, you were just mentioning like your economic development plan or ordinance development, clearly we do the, ordinance, those kind of things as well. And so again, if that's something that you want to move into, it's very common for us to move right into some ordinance rewrite or ordinance BOD structure, whatever it is, as a result of, kind of the comp plan. And so that involvement would continue if, we're invited to do that. And that's something that would be not a kind of unusual, that'd be a normal kind of thing.
We've even had it where during the process, maybe, let's say hypothetically, you have a moratorium on something, you've probably heard that word lately throughout the state, and you need to fast track a quick ordinance, and, maybe you move that topic to the beginning of this process, get your feedback, and let's go ahead and jump into ordinance development and get that off of our list so that moratorium deadline isn't hanging over us any longer.
And then with Deputy, the great resource of the state, comes to the new programs. When Ready 2.0 and everybody gets another new name, new rebranding for it and everything, keeping that kind of touch pulse on some of the initiatives that we recommended, we constantly say no funding program is ever closed and stopped. It's just unfunded and it gets pushed to the side for somebody to, pull that back out, let's put that money into it. We keep that touch pulse onto it. So when we hear things about that, in our plans and everything, maybe something didn't have a strong funding source attached to it. If, say, a new one comes into it, reaching back out, like, hey, I know this was a low priority, but with this thing, you guys are really kind of poised to either apply for that grant or even be, partnered with another, community to go for this funding source, being a part of that whole process.
So like the Lilly Foundation work or whatever, you've got big assistant, those. But again, the things come out of the comp plan that we can then restructure and fold right into Lilly, Stellar, Ready, whatever the name of the.
Whatever it's.
Those kind of things, yeah. Yeah, so we that would be work that we could continue in that engagement as well.
What is your biggest challenge? What piece of this on the top is the biggest challenge? Please provide, so what gives you the most
challenge. So I would say one of the things that the schedule challenge, so if the schedule is the answer to my challenge, is again the level of engagement, because that takes time. And so, if you are wanting to have something done by, this is more in the book world where you are on kind of a timeline, something that has to be done by next date because you get your grant, you got to get submitted and approved and closed out. But that I think is always for us like the challenge that I see right away is the schedule, because if we want to make sure that the input is meaningful, and so there has to be time devoted to make sure it is meaningful, and not just something that I just checked off the list. So to make that meaningful, sometimes then that's adjusting things further out, and if then reviews aren't happening with the steering committee or what have in a timely manner, again, then that's pushing schedule out. So to me, schedule, I always feel under pressure as sort of a challenge, just because we want to meet the kind of the milestones, the deadline that we, kind of set out to begin with. And so always keep that moving in a very proactive, positive manner, I respond is. It's not a bad way, but that's a challenge.
How do you, on the community engagement, because that, in my opinion, is going to be the difficult area, because we have a very uninvolved community in many ways. They like to do other things. How do you find out who's going to be your person to say this is where you need to be? How do you decide where to be, where to go?
Well, I would think as diverse as this group, and this is about the most diverse group we've seen at one of our interviews as far as the representation. We're hoping that on some level, you're going to supply us with some of that because you each represent different groups, have different roles in the community. So that's going to be a big one.
The idea generation is, coming from you all would be, I think, our first thing that we set up our communication plan. That's one of our very first steps, right? So we want to make sure that we're identifying where are the appropriate local festival or farmers market, or, once you tell that to us, then we're like, oh, okay, this is the third Thursday of May or whatever it is. Let's structure something so we hit that. I think that is key, is just identifying everything that's sort of possible and then kind of figuring out what gives you the most bang for your buck. And, what that is. And so if that's the county fair and you have a, mobile display and or, a tabletop kind of thing for a couple of days at the county fair, that's great because we're getting a lot of eyes. And if that's the goal, you're getting a lot of eyes on something versus, and Sam mentioned the engagement being, sort of, it's two-pronged, right? There's an engagement where people are coming to it because they are coming for that purpose. The county fair, they're not coming for that purpose, but they may be introduced to it and follow up later. So, kind of making sure that we're understanding and balancing, like, what are the needs that we want to hit, and then what are the audiences, both at the local town levels, the county level, that make the most sense. As you said, the fish fry, the basketball games, the.
You can sign me up for anything that involves food. Ice cream, fish fry, I'll be there.
We also have more, go back to the more traditional outlets. We've done mailers, utility bill,
Oh,
or
that's good.
I know school will relatively be out of session for this, but we've also connected with newsletters of different organizations. We've done bulletins in some of our different religious sectors, just a little slider into your regular bulletin for it. Again, it's just identifying with that steering committee who are the linchpins for it, and then how can I, pick their brain for a second to like, how do you get your communities and your organization's information out, and how can I slide, even if it's just like a social media graphic that is at the bottom of their regular kind of scheduled thing, and if it's, again, maybe we've done the utilities or even just postcards. We've also done physical things like yard signs at various corners, and it leads to that online engagement, or office hours that come out at a public library for lunchtime, or directly after school, or I'm at a cafe and advertise that if you want to come have a personal conversation, the team's going to be in this community for the morning, and then they're going to be in that community for the afternoon. So again, it's figuring out what's the other ways on top of those regular bigger box office.
And at the end of the day, for us, it's, while of course we'd like to have our numbers as big as possible in terms of engagement, this isn't a scientific, we're not doing a statistically balanced survey, that's not.
I must have 1,000.
Yeah, basically, for us, it's more about making sure that avenues were created that A, people were aware of, and B, if they chose to do it, it was, in an environment that was open and they felt comfortable doing it, whether that's online in your family room or out at the county fair or wherever it was. And so it's always then, I think, you can then say like the availability was there in a variety of avenues. If you chose to participate, then thank you. If you didn't, then it was the opportunity in several different forms were there for you to sort of add your input or preference or priorities or whatever the questions or comments may be. Those kind of things are I think more for us successful at the end of the day in terms of how we determine successful engagement versus, I need to get 52% of the population to follow. And that's how we usually approach that.
And we also have something we kind of coined it as a meeting in the box, and it's just any group can download it from the project website, and it just gives instructions of what their feedback is, and it's a written script. So say even if there's not even a formal group, if a community member gets 30 people together and they want to do the exercises, we give them the very much so IKEA instructions, pictures and step by step for it, that then they would be able to either drop it off somewhere and play themselves, or they can back to us, and again, it's just making that engagement plan fit your community instead of here's our 6 things and that's it.
Miami County, we're doing right now, and with that one, they chose youth as a demographic that they don't hear a lot from. They hear a lot from my colored hair people, but they don't hear a lot from youth. And so we developed a youth engagement that we work with the local school districts there. It was distributed at a junior level, their government class, and all the government students at junior level did the facilitated exercise there and then it's getting back to, so we at least have an opportunity to capture a youth demographic that otherwise we wouldn't necessarily, we can't. So those are kind of the things we think about and create. And again, it's not necessarily about how many did we get, it's just, do we have a cross-section and was the opportunity there for everyone?
So we've talked a couple of times about like the report card check. And, you know, basically holding ourselves accountable and making sure that we're doing something with this plan after we spend $100,000. One of the things we put in the RFP was that we hope that in the process, we can get some guidance on addressing staffing needs to make sure that we do implement it effectively, whether it's my community development office, Carla's building off and planning office, elsewhere, obviously all budget dependent. What is your approach to giving us guidance on what our staffing should look like to be successful in terms of both, like I said, where the staff is, how many positions there are, and what their specific roles are? So we're not just creating positions for the sake of it, but we are targeting them based on what this plan highlights.
Using Jasper with the University of Business example, one of their things, their planning staff started out as one person, and then through their initiatives, it turned into a 3 with a summer 4th person, and there was one identified person that their honest to goodness role was the comprehensive plan. And they themselves did quarterly audits that went to the individual groups and said, hey, you know, you were identified as the primary role. What are the hurdles that you're coming up with? Whereas the other staffers were, you know, looking at their projects that were assigned to them. But that was one of the things that their goal was. They wanted to hit, you know, we say the comprehensive plan is that 10, 15. They wanted at the end of the 10 years, everything was checked off. And that was one of their goals going into it. So it's, you know, trying to figure out what that vision is and how kind of progressive you want to be with some of the initiatives. Does that require the additional staff? Or is it something that can be baked into, say, some of the mission statements of our community groups and how leaning on their staff resources? But again, that goes back into that implementation plan, identifying even, you know, we don't want to recommend something that you guys aren't even really capable of doing. But if it's a goal to, okay, how to get, that's something that may be a long-term goal, but we have to do these incremental, you know, building steps for it until we can even get to that kind of bigger goal. And that's something that will be identified in it.
And sometimes some of that staffing is kind of implied through changes in legislation. For example, last year's House Bill 1005 said permit turnaround times are now 5 days. Inspection turnaround times, you better have somebody out there within 3 days of a requested inspection. If you're not able to do that, clearly there's an identified staffing need. Then the problem becomes how do we fund this? This year's House Bill 1001 says, beginning next year, all of your permit fees need to go into a non-reverting fund. They're no longer dumped into the general fund. So you can start tracking how much funding are we collecting versus what are we spending on the services we provide. So if you have, heaven forbid, any of us has a surplus, you could say, well, I can justify hiring another person because clearly we're getting enough permits coming in.
Sometimes the resource or capacity building, it's always an issue.
Yeah.
And sometimes even outside, of course, just like, that's very traditional planning staffing, right, that you're talking about there. Sometimes what we identified as part of the comp plan are elements that may be more focused on getting additional resources, right? So grant writing, having like a part, so maybe, you know, how do you support a part-time grant? So maybe there's a combination of sources that help fund outside, perhaps through, you know, another patient or wherever else it may be sitting, but they fund a part-time, you know, grant person that helps move some of those projects initiatives forward. So we see that fairly regularly. We see things like local Main Street organizations, you know, they're successful when they have a dedicated person. Well, how do you get a dedicated, you know, who can participate if that's a big priority because it moves these other placemaking projects forward? How do we get that person established because then they make these other things possible? So resource and capacity building certainly would be a subject matter depending on, of course, what sort of ideas or priorities are created, and then organizations where that could fall obviously depends on what the idea or the recommendation is, right, or what the initiative.
Sam, can you talk about your sort of philosophical approach to planning, whether it's like the nuts and bolts or the school of planning you sort of align with, and how that affects your engagement in a process?
So I'm more focused on people. I grew up in DeKalb County, for corner and everything. I had a graduating class of 152. But I now live in downtown Indianapolis. So my kind of world look changed when it comes to where people exist. I like to think of like, what's your community? Like, what do you think of your community? Like my community, it's my neighborhood, it's the gym that I go to, and then it's my downtown entertainment. That's really my community. Some of my friends, though, they live in the suburbs, and so their community is about 30 miles wide and everything, because they're constantly bouncing around. Mine, honestly, it's about 5 miles for it. So I'm more am thinking about how do people live their daily lives and making sure that they're still satisfied in what they call their community. Whereas mine may be a smaller community, and that's where my needs are being met. But others, they have to, transport themselves. But what are they doing in the meantime? They're listening to their podcast, talking on their phone with the person that I've got 15 minutes. This is how long our conversation is going to be. Then again, thinking about how is that the best use of their time. And I love the concept of third spaces. Not just I go to work and then I drive home and then I park in my garage and then that's my linear time. Making those community triangles again, like where can I exist? Some of the youth that we've interacted with, like we don't have a hang up. There's no such thing as going to the mall anymore. Just a place. There's just places for people just to exist and be seen and be safe as well. So is that parks or is that some house? The cool backyard. What is again, what are those needs and how can that community get together?
Why Pulaski County? Why do you want to specifically work with us?
Well, I think it's the types of projects and the types of community that, only for the last 16 years now that I've had this particular practice, that's what we've chosen to sort of engage in. Why we do what we do is to start conversations with people that are lasting. And I think the trusted advisor, meeting kind of those people at the infancy of planning, and I call comprehensive the infancy, right? Like because you're sort of crafting something that's new. That to me is very exciting because you're able to talk about big ideas and new ideas or new fresh approaches to something, whatever the case may be. But being able to take that kind of through the 10 to 12 month kind of process of crafting the plan itself, and then hopefully being able to continue on in terms of as implementation occurs, seeing kind of the fruits of that labor sort of ashore. And so I think working with Pulaski County is something that for me is very approachable, it's very comfortable, and it's something that I don't know, I feel is really kind of our fundamental philosophy of what is that we as a kind of a firm strive to do day in and day out.
And to kind of go on that, I'm actually originally from New Hampshire and everything. I come from small towns and such, so it's like I love the history of the people and what really the heritage of the community is. So instead of taking an approach of we're developing for the sake of development and somebody's got to move forward, it's like, well, no, like what's our identity in that development? What's our kind of history with that movement? And coming from a more rural, small kind of background and making sure that the community still is that heritage and still that natural space and our agricultural space, but balancing that with any sort of development, making sure, again, we're doing it for the needs and not just to do it. It's not reactionary, but it's what the direction we want to go.
I'm interested in Pulaski County. I've worked in Jasper County next door, so I've heard stories to find out, what's going on. But I also appreciate, exactly. I also appreciate you have other things that do marketing for you, like your natural resources. DNR does a lot of work with the state park and promoting that. So, what can we add to that and, make things a larger picture? I also like the diversity of a county where not only do you have the unincorporated areas, but you have the smaller towns that are still alive and active, and then your county seat and that historic area.
So next week, primary election, 1 commissioner seat, 4 council seats up. 1 commissioner and 1 council are guaranteed to change because the incumbents are not running. We could end up with 5 new elected officials out of 10 on our 2 governing bodies in January.
Fun.
How do you react to, address, handle like a change in leadership that could lead to a change in priorities like midstream?
Ironically, that's a little bit happening with the project we're working on now in terms of a staff member that is kind of a third of the way maybe through the project, and the town manager is now leaving or has left. So that I share it only because that's something that obviously has happened before. And I think there was a couple of things. One, obviously, I think you want to make sure that if there are some items of interest or concern that officials are bringing, that we highlight or at least have that conversation to understand what those may or may not be. And I think another thing is perhaps some just broad, and Deborah has done this quite a bit, just broad sort of education in terms of like what is planning and how is all these components fit together. We often, and I don't remember in our sort of a la carte if we had a training session at the end, we've often offered a training session at the end of the process, just so everyone knows, like, it's a tool, like, what do I do with it now that this is adopted? So that's something else that I think that you've done in the past as well, in terms of whether it's the elected official training or others, just to give kind of an orientation. It's, just so that way when they're participating, they're understanding, like, oh, I can kind of see like how this fits into this and what role that plays in terms of a tool that I can use.
And I think that also goes back to the transparency of our process, because once again, going back to our approach, we're data-driven and people-driven, and as well as those incremental touch points where we were talking about influence versus feedback. So some of those even conversations have just been, sitting down and explaining, well, we made this decision because 3 steps back, we heard this from this feedback, we have this case study kind of to back it up, and then we have these statistics to back it up, which then led to leadership going this way. And since it's not, again, that closed door, we're making you a plan and handing it to you kind of thing. It's that collaborative effort. So being able to even just walk through that documentation of the process itself that is on the website that we'll create for you, and even community member can be like, well, why is this a priority, a high priority? They can kind of do that step back. And so again, it's not just the same thing. Parks is the most important thing to do, but why do we think that is, and being able to step it all the way back? So again, it's not just us as the consultants or even you as the leadership making those decisions, but we have 5 different buckets that have been led to those decisions and bringing them on board that way.
We have time for one last question.
What question were you expecting us to ask, but we did not?
Anything on kind of the budget? I know that we presented like our approach based on our understanding of what was in your RFP. We try to always be very diligent about articulating this is kind of how we see kind of our response to what your request is. We're trying to glean like how many units are they actually asking. We're trying to understand that and do our best educated guess based on the information provided. And then, we provide some additional a la carte kind of, options that, maybe of interest or not. But I think being cognizant of what your resources are that you've stated that you have available, and then anything related to the budget question. Almost always, unless it's Oprah's assessed budget, we don't know what it is, so we don't do the question there. When it's locally funded, usually a budget question comes up or a funding question comes up. We get that. So that would be my answer to what I didn't hear.
Thank you, folks.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity. Sam will collect kind of our samples, and she has one other little handout to provide for you. What did you say?
Thesaurus. There's so many times people ask me, they're like, oh, do you know what this is? I'm like, I know that specific tree. Yeah, totally. Let me look it up on my phone and everything. I wish I was Google. Be quite fun.
Thank you. Two of them for you.
What was your favorite, though?
Thank you.
My superpower
Do you
would
want
be
to
able
sign that?
to sneak
Oh, let
into
me go
people's
grab it.
dreams
Okay.
and plant seeds and ideas. So when they see me next, they'll be like, oh, I need to talk about this with you, or. Kind of like a Siri in the background.
What is the Siri?
Yes, I'm gonna drop that word that's gonna pop into your feed and change everything. You got all your savings.
Right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yep, safe travel.
Yeah, dealing with a little bit of a tech headache. If you want to start getting set up. We will.
Well, I brought you a little something that's what we call, so yes.
Library? So you do have somebody who will be getting on Zoom?
Yes, we have some people joining.
Okay. I will, if everyone will play this.
Your collection. So wait, so there's a person here.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Person here as well.
Thank you. And then just me.
Oh, you're a lifesaver.
You stayed here all day for us. The least we could do is bring a little something.
Thank you.
This is last one.
Yes.
Hey, can you hear me? Yes, I can.
Almost a drive up.
Bring that up. It took me
This time of year in Indiana,
that's. It took me the most winding way to get here, though. It wasn't as direct as it was earlier this month.
It's because our state flower, the orange traffic cone, has come into bloom.
You're right.
Yes, I love that.
I did get stuck on 31 a little bit because of that.
Yeah.
State flower. Yeah. Yeah.
got raging headache.
Hmm.
Jonathan, can you hear us?
Yeah, that's no fun.
No.
Hey, Jonathan, can you hear us?
And I think my
Jonathan, can you hear me?
dang.
All right.
Nope. It is in my office bag, not in my handbag.
I don't think I have anything to help you out.
That's okay.
Yes, it's not a great angle, but we can see.
You would think. And the number of headaches I get.
I don't need
personalized.
Do you need an ibuprofen? I have 600 milligram ones, so I get headaches constantly. You can break it in half.
Or I might just be feeling really good. I don't know.
That's unfortunately the normal rate.
That's, I don't.
We can have it count.
And this area?
No.
Okay.
A long time.
There's a lot.
I work government. I have headaches.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. I used to get migraines and I'd have to take a prescription. I have 600 milligrams, but it.
I'll be okay.
Wait, do you want me to drive you home?
No. I get ocular migraines too. So it's like.
First time I had one of those, I thought I was having a stroke, and I couldn't see my phone, and I was messaging my friend, and she said, "You're gonna call my dad, he's gonna pick you up, you're going to the ER." I said, "What?" And to explain, have you ever had one of those?
No, my mom
Explain
did.
it to people.
Yeah, it's like I can't see. Like,
Yes, and then when you
goes
get the,
away.
like,
Rainbow line?
yes, in the kaleidoscope thing when it does the shapes.
Oh, geez.
It's the weirdest thing, Abby. It's like your one eye goes blind and then your other one starts to go black and then you see these shifting lights dancing around and flicking like a kaleidoscope almost. It's the, and no headache.
Do you get a headache with it?
I do.
I just feel weird. It just feels weird.
Huh.
And they say it's no medical issues. I had a whole year. I thought I had the shake in my left hand, but not my right hand. So they tested that, and so they checked for, they had asked me if I had migraines, and I said I was behind my right eye, and they saw that my brain matter was white there. It's consistent with a migraine. So if you get migraines, and for the so
It's super
they
sweet
knew
to
about the optical migraines and said there was
But good,
no
I'm not complaining.
damage, at least from that. From other things, ooh, my list is long. But anyway, if you were ever wondering, you don't have brain damage from it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry that sounds so dumb. But
I probably have brain damage in other ways.
amongst other things, yes.
Because I rubbed my eye and I have lotion, and I was like, my whole eye was.
Oh, during when I coughed and I was trying to hold my cough in because it went down my esophagus, I started crying, then I'm like, no, my nose is running.
Oh, shoot. It's cute popcorn. Feel tutti frutti.
Right there, all right. Well, team, we have reached the final interview. We are in the home stretch. I am Nathan Werger. I'm Director of Community Development for Pulaski County. To my left,
Abby Dickey, and I'm on the planning and BZA.
Carla Redwick, Building Inspector and Plan Administration.
Ian Wright, Executive Director of the Community Foundation of Pulaski County.
Mike Tweedy, Pulaski County Council.
Sheila Zini, Community Development Commission and the council.
So we'll just jump into our background. So I'm Alyssa Blankenheimer. I'm a certified planner at Kimley-Horn, and I will be the project manager for the comprehensive plan.
So, I'm Eric Richard. I'm also an AICP planner, about 10 years of experience. I sit in Columbus, Ohio, actually. I work closely with Alyssa a lot on Indiana and Ohio work. So, meet you.
Turn it over to our online.
Yes, so hey everybody, this is Jonathan Wipers. I sit in our Charlotte office, but love to do this kind of work wherever I am. Today I'm sitting in Linville, Virginia. I would love to be there with you all in person. We just hosted about 30 high school kids at a stakeholder meeting, and then we've got about 50 or 60 stakeholders coming in here in an hour and a half as they help with Virginia with their hours today. So I've been with Kimley-Horn for about 20 years, and again, happy to be with you all today virtually, and hope to see you all in person.
And I'm not pretty sure I'm Kelly Clever. Cindy unfortunately had a family medical emergency. And like I said, I've actually been working behind the scenes QC on this project and plan with Melissa and the team. So I'm very, very good last night and the approach that we're taking here. I've been with Kimley-Horn 21 years, 34 years in practice. Do comprehensive plans, codes, primarily across the southeast, but also serve as a firm-wide resource for landowner codes, use codes, and comprehensive plans like John.
So with that, we'll jump right in. Real quick, briefly, what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk about our firm as a whole and our experience with planning. Then we're going to talk about our local Indiana experience. We're going to walk through some of the projects that we included in our RFP in a little bit more detail. We're going to then transition into talking about your comprehensive plan and our approach for it, as well as our understanding of the goals and aspirations for the plan. And then save enough time at the end for great dialogue about the comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly to talk about the firm as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. And Kimley-Horn is I want to say, a national firm, but a very much local oriented presence. We've been around practice with long with client service in mind. We've been around this kind of stereotype about it. Kimley-Horn itself has been around about 60 years. Also, this one very thorough. We do everything suiting us that product, especially focusing on serving visible clients. Kimley-Horn as a whole has about, and these numbers actually continue to change things like on a monthly basis. We've got over 160 offices nationwide, over 400 planners, including the 4 of us on record today, across the firm, including urban planners, transportation, as well as landscape architects, and over 10,000 partners just supporting us across the firm. She draw from. The more interesting thing I love this is watching how this group has grown and developed, especially in our Indiana, we'll say the upper Midwest market, with over 160 staff members across everything from transportation, urban design, telecommunications, environmental, land use planning, all of them centrally housed within our Indiana offices. And more importantly, this is something that is very critical, and you'll hear us talk about this quite a bit. Across the firm, as much as the four people we're talking about, a lot of people that you're seeing here on this organizational chart, we've been involved in over 300 comprehensive plans, national land use plans, and the like. Jonathan Lang has served as a firm-wide resource, and there's we've been involved in significant number of those. But we're able to bring a depth of experience from national markets similar situated well as more importantly from a competency building perspective, including across the state of Indiana.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So before I talk about our local experience, I'm going to quickly talk about our philosophy about planning. So our approach is built around a simple promise. We want to keep it focused on what matters, your community, and make it easy and simple to implement. With that, every piece of this wheel pie matters. And it all comes together to form our philosophy. So briefly, because we're a multidisciplinary firm, we maximize resources and do a lot of in-house collaboration. I know where everybody on this call sits, and I also know who to talk to if they're not responding to my messages. So we'll keep on track. We also foster collaboration and do inclusive engagement. And Jonathan's going to talk about our approach to community engagement a little bit further on this slide. We also want the recommendations that we give you actionable and implementable, so including whys and hows is very important to us and to our customers. And we also want the document to be simple. We want it to communicate outcomes, and we want it to be easy for you as a county to utilize. So with that, I'm going to quickly talk about our local experience and then move on to the projects. So in the state of Indiana, we have extensive experience doing master plans, comprehensive plans, and community engagement events, one of which was the Pulaski County Broadband Plan that we recently adopted earlier this month. So our work here in the region means that we can move efficiently and we know what's kind of happening. We can stay grounded in the local realities for the county and for so back briefly to the broadband plan. One of the things that we all collectively discovered and learned based on our expertise in the industry, some of our team members, was that broadband is truly another community utility, just like water, sewer, electricity is. And so this plan focused heavily on how to connect those dots, connect the rural communities into the larger network. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Leanne and Nathan for their extensive involvement. Because of their relations and connections, we were able to get over 200 people to respond to our community survey, which is really great. And in a community the size of yours,
Should probably give credit to Kurt too.
Yeah,
that's
Kurt
Abby's.
well.
That's Abby's husband, so she's gonna report back that you didn't.
We couldn't miss Kurt.
No, I'm sure.
But yeah, so thank you for your involvement, both of you, and it definitely made working with you guys very great.
This is where you're going to be right?
Yes.
Perfect. So it was an interesting kind of conversation that our team had as we were trying to think of the hundreds of examples that Kelly mentioned just a few minutes ago. What should we really highlight here? Yes, came up for a variety of reasons. One is a project that was Cindy and I are actively involved in. And we were just really struck by some of the similarities in Gaston County, North Carolina, that you all might face in kind of some lessons learned that are very fresh in our mind. This particular plan is in the final stages of development, so we're looking to have both a comprehensive plan and UDL update adopted within the next few months. But I think when we think about comprehensive plans, a lot of times the two words that come up most often is structure, working hard to develop areas, obviously some similarities of the challenges that you all are facing. Gaston County is a little bit different. They have 13 municipalities that they have to contend with, each with kind of personalities and kind of different opinions and what to do with the edges of those municipalities. And so we've been working through that challenge. But it really does, boil down to like, how do we help the county deal with the growth pressures that come, especially when those pressures are bringing kind of external influences that are out of control. So like what can the county do to get out ahead of that in some ways, try to steer the direction of the community in the best way possible. Again, yes, a lot of that is rural preservation and in the face of what we characterize as an outgrowth, because yes, County, a lot of that growth is heading east from the municipality or from the metro area of Charlotte. And so the eastern part of that county is growing a lot faster than the western part. And so they're just dealing with the challenges that come with that. I think what we're doing, regardless of the plan that we're working on, is that emphasis that we're going to put on implementation. And so that's true with Gaston County as well, as we're not just putting together a vision document, we're putting together a implementation and action plan that is responding to the vision that we all created with the community and the staff. Love to answer your question if you want about that process when the time comes.
Yeah, so here's another example from, I guess, sort of locally, but LaPel, Indiana, over in Madison County, we did their comprehensive plan. It was kind of interesting because it kicked off about 6 months into the pandemic. And so, that just changed everything about how we did engagement. The community was very supportive of us using social media and Mentimeter software to engage with the public. We also left surveys and public input boards at public places like the post office and various other places around the community, and got really good feedback there. So overall, it was a success. We had about 23 action items that came from it across 5 different disciplines, so land use, transportation, economic development, stormwater management, parks. And from that as well, they were able to spawn off actually kind of more specific planning efforts. So there was a Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as a Thoroughfare Master Plan that was very successful. From that Thoroughfare Master Plan, LaPel was able to apply to NDOT to get community crossings funding to conduct projects to help improve roadway safety. So it's kind of an example of, it's interesting because it was like the comp plan kind of trickled down to the Thoroughfare Plan, which trickled down to grant funding. So, it's kind of an example of that whole process from like vision to action. So yeah, we're very proud of it.
Now we're going to transition the conversation to talk about Alaska County and our approach and our understanding for the project. So from previous conversations, we understand that you're balancing agriculture and renewable energy pressures, and you want better tools to guide land use decisions. We also understand that the county's current comprehensive plan is a little bit older, and there's been some significant ordinance and development changes since it's been passed. So getting an updated and a clear roadmap for where you're at now and where you want to be the next 10 to 20 years. We heard an interest in strengthening parks and recreation and tourism in the process, and we learned about that a little bit in the broadband plan. One of the community engagement models that we did was people got Alaska dollars and they could vote on where they wanted to see broadband infrastructure improve first. And we were all a little bit surprised when parks and tourism and recreation was second in that ranking. So we'll carry that in here to this project. And in general, our process is designed to identify those trade-offs, the push and pull of what's important really in the process, so we can have robust discussions about it and come to clear and implementable. So as planners, we plan before we plan. One of the things that we know is really important is clear communication, and we want to establish that process so that we're all on the same page as what's happening and when it's happening. Project schedule-wise, we really divide comprehensive plans into 3 phases. The vision, where we collect all the data and we learn about you as a county, where you want to go, who you want to be. That planning phase, where we take everything we've heard and transition that into objectives, goals, steps to get you guys that vision. And then act, where we take those goals and those visions and move them into adoptable and implementable plans and action. So continuing that planning before we plan mentality of right-size kickoff meeting, data assembly, and engagement strategy are our assessment plan. I'm going to transition it to Erin, who's going to talk about how we do data collection and what we look at, and then on to Jonathan, who's going to talk about community engagement.
Thanks, Alyssa. So I like to think of data collection as kind of being step one for any process because, it serves as the baseline, having reliable and accurate existing conditions data is sort of the baseline for any kind of scenario planning or mapping that we do, as well as any recommendations that we make throughout the process. So Kimley-Horn uses, we don't have any specific, tools that we use for every single plan, but we like to tailor them based on what the project is that we're doing. So, we make good use of social pinpoint, urban footprint, and community biz software. We're actually lucky because I mentioned earlier how big we are. We actually hire folks who specifically create, they're like computer software people that create their own internal proprietary software tools. So one of those is called Public Coordinate. It's sort of like social pinpoint. It's like a mapping tool that can go in and add comments, and there's a survey component to it as well. And not saying that we necessarily need to use this on this project, but it's just an example of one of the tools that we have in our bag. So, yeah.
Jonathan's going to talk a bit about the engagement that we use for Gadsden County and then our engagement philosophy.
Yeah, I like I said a little bit, because I think I can talk from the agreements about engagement, and that's not the essence of our time here. I will say that everything came on an important point, and that's like the data that we generate as part of this process and kind of what we do with that data. And you asked through some of the technical data related to demographics and economic development and kind of land use and utilities and all that goes into that. We also think about data in terms of the people who will set and bring through the process. And so that's where engagement comes in, how we kind of collect that input and hold that data on par with the technical data that's collected elsewhere. And I do think that when we talk about all the different plans that we work on, we have very clear understanding that each place is unique and the needs of each place are require a unique solution. Because that's why when we talk about from the engagement perspective, when we start with strategy, we don't just kind of come up with a laundry list of meetings and activities and digital tools. Instead, we'll sit down with you all and have a conversation about what you're trying to achieve as part of this process from an engagement perspective. And how many resources do you have, not just one, but you all are very busy people. So having an understanding of the time you can invest in this process, so we can invest into that. So that we can align with resources with the goals that you all have set forth. So when we talk about an engagement strategy, that's exactly what it is. We also acknowledge the importance of building awareness of not just this process, but the hard work that you all do every day from a planning perspective. There's more beyond that. There's just a disconnect between kind of the value of planning. And so we'll use this process to build awareness and start to bridge that gap. That's what we talk about cultivating and understanding of the process and kind of where the county is in its life cycle. We want to invite human participation. So we know that it's never been harder to get people to engage in the process. And so, our promise to you all is if somebody clicks the button on survey or walks through the door to a public meeting or joins us for a stakeholders input, we're going to make the best use of their time and the input that they provide. On the next slide, I'll kind of really quickly highlight that there's also a more of a competition for people's time. And so we really think that there's a value placed on meeting people where they are. We recognize that, for us, County is a large and diverse area, and we'll be carefully creating a way to meet people kind of in ways that they find convenient and comfortable. And so you can see some of the options, whether it's a festival or farmers market, lunch community centers, and the like. I think at the end of the day, I want to improve our blocks. And the key there is, most looking firms that you're speaking with probably have those same tools. So really it comes down to how do we kind of really listen to you all in terms of the goals that you have from an engagement group perspective. and then how do we align those with resources and make sure that, at the end of the process, when, we're presenting this plan for adoption, we involve it as a community-driven plan, and that people that participated can see the influence of that participation.
We're getting more into the meat of it, the actual comprehensive plan. So we'll first start with a draft plan that identifies a clear vision, goals, and priorities for the community. And one of the most important pieces of that is the future land use map. We know that everything kind of leads to and leads from that plan, all different types of elements like housing, infrastructure, economic development, quality of life, like tourism. From the start, document is going to be written with implementation in mind, which one of the things that we like to do as planners is have that aspirational language, but for this comprehensive plan, it's going to be more driven towards action, not so much of a fluffy aspirational language, very much this is what, pragmatic language. Once the draft is complete, we'll move it into review and refinement, which means getting a lot of input from all as well as the community, making sure that what is being recommended really does align with what the community wants. Means we'll tighten up that language, policies, ensure that there's internal consistency that, like I said, forms with the local priority. The result is a final comprehensive plan that is clear, actionable, which will provide you guys with a level of map for growth and a future map that you guys can use. So that covers the process at a high level. I'm going to pass it over to Kelly now to talk about our
Queuing pieces is not something we just say we're going to do based on somebody from the board perspective. It's something we can do very seriously. And that's why we identified a quality champion in this case. In this case, Brad Tree, who is a seasoned professional that has done a number of broad-based plans, both in the public and private sector. He will be the one meeting with the team on a milestone basis, checking in, performing those quality audits, and also kind of asking those tough questions. Brandon will also be utilizing teams such as myself and Jonathan and some of the other teams that we have around the firm, asking some of those specific questions, those independent, almost like an independent review of the team's approach to this plan. So that when we do see the plan, it's been through a thorough process where it's not only just looking for formatting, spell check, but the terms, the ideas, and goals that we identify here carry forward and importantly, those goals to the classified. So at the end of the day, one of the great things I want to say is like Kimley-Horn, and in this case, it's not just because we're here because we want to be here. We're a group of professionals that work together. We collaborate across communities. We bring together a very rich resource and a robust set of experiences. And more importantly, we tailor-make these types of plans for the community. Several of us, including myself, have worked in the public sector, so we understand what it means to be sitting on your side of the table. Not only from a plan perspective, but also from the elections and also the public. And being able to go down to the grocery store and say, when somebody stops you, says, what's going on with the comprehensive plan? You're able to do that. So understanding that extensional staff aspect. As said earlier, you all are very busy. You've got other things. Let us do everything for you. That targeted stakeholder engagement is really able to get into the nuts and bolts and not just check a box there, but more importantly, reach out to those individuals that have a business to say, who are going to be the champion of this plan, not only through this process, but also through the implementation. And more so, as this plan is being rolled out incrementally over the next year, 2 to 3 years, who are those champions that will continue to press for those items? So understanding from that aspect. And again, we're a multidisciplinary team. We brought together a team that are financial planners, transportation, environmental, psychological engineers, all of which have a keen interest in understanding and working in the community and helping establish a short and long-term vision much like what we did last year. Alyssa?
Thanks, Kelly. So take away anything from this, please take away that we're bringing you a team that is qualified to work with people on a comprehensive plan. We're very excited to be able to continue working on this plan and project out of it. With that, love to know from you guys what you guys think as a success of the conference, of the new one. What would be a success?
For me, selfishly, from my position, my perspective, the two things I most hope to see are the guidance that we need for the county to make the best decisions possible, making long-term community impact investments with the revenues from solar projects. Those projects obviously have brought a lot of controversy. There are concerns. There are certainly whatever long-term concerns prove to be right or wrong. There have been undeniable short-term concerns. Being able to make sure that that revenue is something that people see, maybe that there was a reason for this, that we are improving their schools, their parks, and then also semi-related to that, that our redevelopment commission has something that can use as sort of a North Star as it figures out plans, projects, programs it wants to undertake. And before I pass it to anyone else to share, a question I wanted to ask that ties to what I just said. We mentioned that in the RFP about guidance for how we allocate those funds. Like, what is your approach to the guidance you'll provide as part of this process to make sure that the decisions we make with those solar project revenues are get us the best long-term bang for our buck?
Thanks for the question. I think it all comes down back to those conversations with community members and with stakeholders, understanding where their priorities lie, and then figuring out and working with them on how to get there. So what types of investment that could look like, and building that into the comprehensive plan to provide a clear roadmap on how to get there, whether that's stating specifically, study this, study that, this project even, it all comes back to that community and stakeholder engagement.
Thanks. Other people want to share their hopes then?
Yeah, along those lines, talking about solar projects, we'd like to see a comprehensive plan that brings some balance back into Alaska County so that all members of this back to provide some.
We were just talking this morning about that balance, agriculture, other
Yeah, I think these can be, projects like this can be an opportunity done right to create community and also to gain community trust as you go. I used to live in Carolina and sorry, I just got back from the National Planning Conference, so I'm kind of like losing my voice. But I used to work in the public sector in North Carolina, and I was in a town that was growing. It's close to Raleigh. It was growing really fast. A lot of people were not happy with the pace of growth and with especially the housing situation was a big issue. It's interesting because there was actually the housing stock, there was enough there, but people wanted, higher level of, housing in the area. So, we had a housing plan that we undertook, and I think it really helped get people to, get them to turn out and give their opinion and to, you have to make sure that any voices that are present and give their opinion are, they end up in the plan, that they're, not just a sounding board, but it actually shows up later on.
So how do you balance that input versus influence?
Well, I think it's.
How do you?
I'm sorry, I think we're killing you. I'm a little hard time hearing you all.
How do you balance input versus influence?
Yeah, I think it's important to just remember that comprehensive plan is comprehensive, so it has to include everybody. So that's the toughest thing, I mean, and ultimately it's going to be up to the elected officials to adopt it. So
And I'll jump in and say,
yeah,
that's what our steering committee is for. The steering committee is definitely a true cross section of the community, getting all of those voices to the table. And it may end up being a bit of a give and take debate at the end of the day to get all the voices heard, but that's where we'll rely on the steering committee, staff, and like you said, to make sure that, again, the plan reasonable and aligns with local community priorities.
One of the challenges because we have so many members at this point where they don't feel heard, they don't feel represented, and they truly are just shut down. So you're going to want to look for a response of it doesn't matter. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. I think they become very complicit. However, you can engage them. Let them know that you, dawn is rising. That's going to be one of your challenges.
I think that feeds back into what Jonathan was saying about building trust in the community, bringing us all back to even ground zero level one. So we're all moving together.
Jonathan, question for you.
Okay.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
I would love to give people the ability to quickly evaluate trade-offs. How about that? Because I feel like a comprehensive plan is so inadequate, so the conversation that we've already had is getting what are some of those trade-offs that you all kind of need to evaluate kind of in the short term and in the long term. I think that the public can have a really hard time kind of contemplating those trade-offs in real time. That's a warning, so I would love to get a flag.
Okay, that is the dirtiest answer I've got all day.
Yeah, there you go. So you have a warning answer and the actual is the ability to flag. And if I could flag, I'd probably be instead of hearing from Jane.
Well, thank you.
Kelly, you want to share yours?
You're good.
So in our RFP, one of the things that we highlighted, we would hope as would come out of this is some outside third-party guidance on improving our staffing to make sure that we have the capacity to implement this project, whether it's in my department, Carla's, both, whether we're looking at outside partners or other community agencies, and depending on what the specific goals and objectives are. But making sure that we have the right number of people in the right places with the right job descriptions and focuses so that we're hiring people, not just to hire people, but with specific responsibilities to make sure that this is a living, acted upon document. How do you approach providing that guidance for us?
I think that's a great question. I'll start and then I'm going to pass it on to Kelly to talk about a little bit. It all comes down to what ultimately are all of the implementation recommendations and what does that realistically look like on a short-term, medium-term, and long-term perspective. In terms of staffing capacity, certainly work to match what staff can reasonably handle with what we'll give you. Now, sometimes we know that doesn't realistically align all the way, and so we'll certainly identify in the process where that mismatch is happening, and we can work with our internal teams to help create those job descriptions or position descriptions that Kelly?
Yeah, another connection question, especially from the folks that decided academically, possibly decided to manage this type of project, but more importantly, kind of looking at staffing from not only obviously a complete total diagnostic that we do overall almost in Kentucky. With our development process, looking at everything from not only the resources, but more importantly, who's doing what organizations can control certain things, and also these align with the expectations from a budgetary perspective. So, having an XPI, programs just have to be implementable. They have to be funded, and more importantly, we come up and say, oh, we're going to implement a form-based curve to do this for a county architect. That's not the last guy. So right sizing, context sensitive, understanding your budgets, and starting to kind of give these curves components of look at your staffing, this is what we recommend, and at least kind of start to come up with that long-term, like on a capital personnel.
The only thing that I'll add to that is, I mentioned in the places and this is on kind of the action plan side of it. I think there's the implementation strategy needs to identify who's tasked with doing whatever that action item is, whether it's a policy, a project, a plan, or a program. And I think sometimes we do that and we take a step back and realize that we've overheard any one particular department because they're understaffed. And I think that kind of information is going to be really helpful. Because you want to create a staffing, not just for kind of this moment in time, but kind of 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
How would you measure the success or the impact of your work in Pulaski County?
That's a really good question. I think the answer would be having something from the comprehensive plan be implemented. But I think the better answer to that is building those connections with the community, bringing back trust in the public process, hearing what people have to say and hearing how excited they are about where plastic comes. That's the truth.
Which covers what I was going to say too. Yeah. I would say too, plans, they tend to have kind of like short-term wins and then, maybe medium-term and then long-term goals. I'd like to see, hopefully almost all of the short-term wins to be achieved. And then, at least the majority of the long-term ones as well. So, yeah.
What have communities told you they appreciate most about working with your firm?
I'm definitely going to send it over to Jonathan and Kelly to answer. I think one of the things that we've heard a lot is how responsive we are. Also, because we are like a one-stop shop with the Arizona right now, we have all the resources. Things happen, things change, we can rely on partners as emergency. Kelly was able to step last minute 3 hours ago. That's also something that we hear a lot about what they do.
There's also no rivalry between offices. I know we're like big, but other firms, there's kind of like the siloing effect where if there's a project and maybe they need help from somebody, like if an indie office needs help from someone in Detroit, they have to have an agreement to actually get somebody from Detroit to work on the project and do all this horse trading. It's not like that at all with Kimley-Horn. I mean, I've worked on projects in Kansas, Indiana, Ohio, and I sit in the Midwest. I've worked on projects all over the place, and it's instantaneous. I mean, and there's no egos at all. I would say, from the client side, your perspective, people just I think how, there's no questioning. It's like if you need something done, we're just solution oriented, and it's like that. So, yeah.
One of those, me, myself, and I, as an individual, may not have an answer, but I know someone who does.
Yeah.
John, you can go ahead.
Yes, so just to make sure I'm on the same page, the question is, you know, what are the folks that we work with, like, find value in kind of that working relationship? Is that kind of, am I getting that question right?
Correct.
Well, I think you all are kind of approaching this from the right perspective, like the guidance that you all gave us in terms of what you were expecting out of the conversation that we're having right now, which is making sure that we're a good fit, right? Both, you know, that you are a good fit for us and we're a good fit for you. So I would hope that kind of the reflection that, you know, other folks that work with us have is that partnership was effective, right? We ask the right questions, we hold each other accountable. Because at the end of the day, this is a difficult process, but it's also a process that you all get to just do every year or every year. So you've got to get this right. And so I think kind of that responsiveness, that accountability, and you know, how we find out what we're work with, that we take things to the right level of seriousness, and at the end of the day, you know, we're able to have fun together as we're doing some very, very challenging work.
Yeah, and I'm going to quickly echo what I said. It doesn't matter where our professionals or team members sit, they're part of this team. And, you know, and I'm also echo again what I was saying. I've got projects where I have partners from California, from Arizona, from North Carolina. And at the end of the day, it's all about class service. The other thing I will tell you is we make a point to be very, when I say yes, totally communicative, but also, you know, if there's no question too small, there's no question too big, we can't answer. And actually, I just had a call right before this interview for the client of ours, and I don't like using her client, but because of the role like teammates. And she was like, hey, I know this is your civil services, but we just had this project. I'm like, how would you address it? It's like, sure, what do you guys do? So just, you know, that small approach to projects, but having that national expertise to be able to back it up is one of the things I continue to do.
Yeah, and I want to also just emphasize that you're going to get a local team. I mean, Alyssa's here in Indy. I'm just over the state line in Ohio, and you know we have a lot of Midwest experience. So you're not going to get just like a fly-by-night team from all over the place. We rely on people who are experts that we know of. Like for example, I've done some work on recently, like roadway safety projects, and I know that there's a guy in our Dallas office who's like an ADA transition plan guru. And so I'll just hit him up with questions whenever I need. And so it's kind of like that. It's not like we're going to be here and then you're going to get all kinds of new faces. I mean, we're going to be with you all the way to the end. Yeah.
Alyssa, could you describe a little bit sort of like your perspective, worldview, philosophy you bring to the planning process, whether it's like the nuts and the mechanics of the process itself, or like the bigger picture planning school or philosophy you align with that guides you? Who are you as a planner and in the process?
That's a very deep question.
It's usually deep when I'm here, Alyssa.
You're right. Who am I as a planner? I want to see communities. That's who I am as a planner. And so my approach to planning adapts based on what the community, the focus, the drive, all this relates back to that. So obviously community engagement is vital for any type of project, and more specifically and especially. And so that means being flexible. Jonathan said, meeting people where they're at, having those one-on-one conversations, and making sure people understand that I'm here, I'm on your side, and I want you as much as you want you. That's my approach. And then I'm also a practical person. So, like I mentioned, none of the fluffy language stuff. I want it to be realistic. I want it to be real. I want it to be almost like a checklist, so it's easy to go, yep, do that, yep, that's what comes next. Okay, do that, do that, do that. I don't want your plans to gather dust on the shelves. I would use that as a waste of all of our and time.
How do you incorporate the ordinance with the comprehensive plan?
In terms of,
Do you Do you combine any of our ordinance language with the comprehensive plan, or do you take into consideration anything in the ordinance with the comprehensive plan?
So I think when we talk about comprehensive planning and zoning ordinances, the zoning ordinance goal is to implement the goals and the vision of the comprehensive plan. While there can be some play backwards, taking things that are in the zoning code and bring them into the comprehensive plan, it really moves the other direction. Where oftentimes like the number one recommendation of a comprehensive plan is to then update zoning ordinance to align with the new goals. We're doing that in Washington County right now. I think Jonathan was going to jump in and say something about that.
Yeah, so like, if I could jump in real quick, that's a follow-up question. You all are asking great questions, by the way. I would say, you know, those things, the ordinance and the plan are seemingly two separate entities, but they can't exist without each other, right? And so a lot of times in our comprehensive plan, we start with a code diagnostic, just so we can understand where there's some shortfalls that you're having from the regulatory side that might be contributing to some of the challenges that you're experiencing on the long range planning side. We applaud folks that try to get their plan in order before they take a look at their code and regulations. It's just a natural follow-up. You know, we work with places where they do a comprehensive plan right after they've done a code update. And you know, the sequencing is just a little bit off in that situation. I mentioned Gatsby County was very familiar with this as well. She's actually kind of much more involved on the code side and a little bit more involved in the comprehensive plan. I think some of the challenges that we're facing in that situation is there's just a lot more overlap in terms of those processes. And so like, we're constantly trying to plan the comprehensive plan and managed plan out ahead of the code. But there's so much interest in Gadsden County on the regulatory side from our stakeholders that we're having to kind of, for lack of a better term, stiff arm a little bit, just so again we can get things, get the order of sequence correct. But it is a good question because again they're tied together in a lot of different ways.
Okay, next Tuesday, primary election. Come January, we are going to have one new commissioner and at least one new council member. It'd be up to 4 new council members. How do you adjust to react to address leadership changes midstream? You know, we could have as many as 5 new elected officials out of 10 between the 2 governing bodies. When that could mean changes in priority. How do you plan for that in the process?
I think being nimble is the biggest part of that, understanding that when new people join the process, they need to backtrack a little bit and do that education part of comprehensive planning process again, bring them up to speed on the role and the goals of the company. With that said, engagement is still in there, and I would hope that in those meetings, surveys, and that's they're kind of keyed in already to what's going on. The shifting priorities, I think, going back to that being nimble thing, understanding that it's not like elected officials and their role and goal setting is important, but a comprehensive and so merging the community goals with new potential new priorities of the community.
That's okay, but just because I know we did this agreement on a number of different projects together. We now work with the Louisville, North Carolina code, and then a couple of these others. You know, having new county commissioner, commission members, city council members come in and disagree with something that we pretty much understand what we have just because of the time of some of these projects. So, you know, the education component is critical, having some of that level of time. So, what like you were saying was, you know, understanding that there's going to be different priorities, different options that may be, you know, present from that new member. but sitting down and understanding, listening to them and having them understand what we're doing and why, and what is our big picture. So that instead of it being a public facing atmosphere like being well, I was elected to, stop growth. It's having that where you're becoming that personal known entity to the member as well. Again, education is key. Understanding what the big picture goal at the end of the day and being able to adapt. They may be talking about a specific item and how do you better adapt that to the context plan without it being a total, I'll say, trillion dollar battle or that sort of.
That question. You're going to be getting. You emphasize there a greater emphasis leadership. Input. Where do you take all of that and say this is where you need that? Leadership was clear on.
I think that's a challenge that we face. Your voice in the room. Relying on staff direction, any direction on that is critical. Or that.
I think it's helpful to quantify, and this is why surveys are good, like quantifying, what percentage of the respondents feel a certain way about a certain thing, and then bringing that data forward to the elected body and the steering committee and saying, hey, this is what you're getting, and this is the number of people that responded. How do you feel? I mean, ultimately, it's the steering committee who would recommend the plan and the elected officials who adopt it, but so, we're beholden to them, but at the same time, you're right, it's a community plan. So you want to make sure, and we want to emphasize as professionals ethically too, that, it should be something that's democratic and that the.
What is that information?
The survey results? Yes, we do provide that information. Well, some slides of what has been said. And we also provide staff raw survey data so that that's available to them.
Why are you interested in working with Pulaski County specifically?
I think I'm interested in working with Pulaski. Working with you guys with the project, and I learned a lot about really exciting that you guys are interested in continuing to, I guess, to better yourselves almost, to continue recognizing that change is coming, change is happening. How do we make it the best? That's something I want to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Follow that.
Yeah, how do I get it? Well, I'm from the Midwest. I like the Midwest. I like Pulaski County. The Tippecanoe River is really pretty. There's a lot of just general stuff about your community that I really like. I also really like doing rural planning because there's a lot of unique challenges in 2026 that rural communities are facing. And so I'd say that's why I like it. That's why I was interested.
If I can jump in, I think one of the reasons that I would want to work with you all in your county is Alyssa. I think she speaks highly of you all, she speaks highly of the county, and it makes me excited about the opportunity. I also think too that Kelly and I like to work in places that can make a difference. And we feel like there's a value that we can add to this process so that you all work with us again.
Well said. Well said.
What questions were you expecting us to ask, but we did not?
Well, I was gonna say that I was gonna expect you all to ask me what superpower I would like, but I
That's Nathan.
That's
I did not warn them ahead of time that they.
There's a reason I didn't ask you that question.
I think one of the questions that we had down was what's different this time with the comprehensive plan not being for a while. That's one of the ones that we kind of talked through a little bit as a team. And Sean had highlighted it a little bit on your zoning, the question about doing that county snapshot graphics, diagnostic, and pulling that together to create an accurate picture. Like today, right now, in this moment, as a launch pad for what should like, or even a short 6 months.
That's a lot of work, 6 months.
But okay. That's what short-term big wins are. Yeah. Build that continuous momentum.
I thought you might ask us about like AI. And that's like a big thing now. Probably tired of it, right? Yeah. I just got back from the planning conference in Detroit, and there were like 5 different sessions on AI.
Still have a few minutes. Anybody else or any last words you guys want to share?
Couple questions.
Yeah. Sure.
So tourism planning, you guys have that in process? You mentioned the more recreation.
So tourism planning was something that first kind of started in like 2016, but we didn't have any sort of formal tourism body. It was just the one board I worked for at the time. Then we started picking it up a couple of years ago, but then we decided we were going to take on the comprehensive plan and we didn't want to get any deeper into that. And so I think the Tourism Advisory Council and I see tourism strategic plan being something we want to revisit and finish fleshing out once we have the relevant components of this plan as a guide, so we're not putting all that time in and then saying, well, that's not what the community thinks we should prioritize, that sort of thing. But so it stopped and started and stopped again and is waiting now for this process to be done.
Okay. Well, with that kind of additional stuff, what place identity should the comprehensive plan strengthen? What do you guys want Classic County?
I mean, I think
the comprehensive plan needs to tell us that.
that's a fair point. I do think we all know that outdoor recreation, especially like March or April through September, October, that's our strength. We do still have a local independent one screen theater and it's very popular, but we succeed in the tourism front with the warm weather outdoor stuff, the trail, the river, the state park, the livery serving the river, paintball,
Horseback riding.
Yes, horseback riding. The dirt, like our racetrack. But so, I mean, I think we all, and obviously there's overlap between the two, but I think from a recreation side specifically, we need more to do in the winter to get ourselves out of the house. Third places that are not just restaurants, bars, that sort of thing. As far as like what we're selling outward, I think while that can help, it's really continuing to sell and to build onto the product we have to bring people here when they're out of school, kids are out of school, and have those opportunities.
For the cold weather, then what would be your ideal third?
If we could convince the state park to get cross-country skiing again, or if we've talked to one of the golf courses about it, but there's too much a risk of damage of taking skis across it. That's something that used to happen. But whether it's indoor or out, I don't know. And we all know it's a matter of what we can actually support, no matter how many people want it, if they're not all going to go there frequently enough. I mean, how many times I've heard we need a bowling alley again. But Are enough people going to bowl frequently enough that it's going to survive?
Well, shouldn't we even take it a step back? So like, in order to have those things, we need to go back into our comp plan and make sure that we have housing and broadband and all the things so that we can build that, so that we can have those things. And that's the whole point of this, isn't it?
I want to set you up for success, not just for tomorrow, but for tomorrow's.
Glad you mentioned third places though. I mean, that's important, especially with like how digital and how everything is now online and social media is, especially for young people to have places outside of school and home they can go.
I think it'll depend on who you survey, but I get calls every week people wanting to rent a house. I don't even own very many houses, but they still think I do. They call me all the time. They always want to. Facebook Messenger is another way they get hold of me. It's just amazing the housing need that's in this.
Rented housing is becoming popular, and I used to work for a multi-family developer. And we were moving build to rent communities, also because people are realizing that they want house size and backyard size, but not the maintenance responsibility. That's something. It probably wouldn't be a whole development. That's not ideal. A little bit more grassroots.
There's definitely a need.
I don't mean to be rude, but I have a son that has a baseball game, and if I miss this one too, he's going to kill me. So I'm going to duck out. But thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Sheila.
Bye, guys.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Sheila, can you get your scores back to me no later than noon on Monday? Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for them? Or do you have any other questions for us you wanted to ask?
We have a whole list, but.
You know what? You have 5 minutes to ask before I'm going to call it.
Okay, let me to find the best question. Trails, connections. What is the one connection or near-term win that you want the plan to help move from idea to action, whether that's north-south links, any types of.
So, about the same time, we started working on a very bare bones tourism plan. Do you remember the Hometown Collaboration Initiative program from Okra about 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago?
Yeah.
We were trying to develop a comprehensive, like, share the road bike routes network that would connect east side and west side, connect to the Panhandle Pathway, connect to trails in Stark and Jasper counties. And there were some issues with timing and funding ultimately in part because the Panhandle, its northward growth has been a lot slower than we had hoped it would be at that point. And, you know, we didn't want to put too much time and money into drawing out maps that were going to change if/when we finally got the trail built forward. But I would really like us to be able to revisit that project. I mean, there may be some, you know, we even did some traffic counting. Kirksey did some for us to figure out, fine tune some roads. So we have it all mapped out. At this point, we probably need to revisit and make sure those routes make sense. Still waiting on the Panhandle, but I would like to revisit that. You know, Jasper County has done some trail planning. Stark County is trying someday to get the trail there to connect with trails farther north. So someday you could probably ride a bike from like Crown Point to Winnemac to Logansport and beyond. And I want that to be brought back to the table for conversation.
How our lands are in the office. I sit on. We've done extensive trail type planning, and I know we've done some stuff in Jasper. That's definitely something that locally we have a lot of experience.
You got one last question for us?
I don't think any on this list have short answers. So,
We can give you 3 or 4 minutes. I mean,
I'm going to say thank you guys so much.
and for answering our questions. Hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please do not turn off your microphones. I'm gonna do an audit on all of the battery life now instead of having to go back and come through that, so just leave your microphones on. If you have completed your scores already, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, it's a Sheila, please do it on Monday so I can get that out to the commissioners in advance.